Ladies, what do you wish self-proclaimed nice guys would understand? Romantic comedies are nothing like real life, and using the tactics shown in them will only creep the object of your affections out, not win them over. They should be treated just like fantasy movies because that's pretty much what they are. Just a fantasy you enjoy seeing acted out for various reasons. It's like how it's commonly accepted that adult flicks aren't real. Well, consider romantic comedies emotional adult movies and treat them accordingly, please. Absolutely agreed. Do not show up under my window at 2 a.m. Do not creep until you figure out which hotel I'm staying at on my vacation and send miniature beanie babies that reminded you of me to the hotel addressed to me. Do not awkwardly try to steal my clothing to put on your pillow and sleep with because it smells like me. Do not leap between me and anyone I'm having a conversation with to ensure that they're not going to incapacitate me and commit the unspeakable act in the midst of a huge group of people. And do not find out where I work and consistently leave love letters under my windshield for me to find when I get off my shift. None of these things are acceptable or appreciated. I'm not quoting movie sequences, folks. I'm speaking from experience. And what these guys told me they considered romantic gestures. Although the showing up under the window and the love letter on the windshield ones are pretty 80s rom-com. I think proclaiming yourself a nice guy is the problem in the first place. People who are genuinely considerate and decent don't have to declare themselves honest and nice. People know them to be so by their behavior. Being nice, specifically as a means to impress women, as a means to an end, is not genuinely being nice. It's kind of like the Game of Thrones quote, "Any man who proclaims, 'I am the king,' is no true king." Hearing guys describe themselves as nice immediately makes you immature. It's the equivalent of saying, "I'm not like other girls." Sure, maybe you are or aren't, but proclaiming it does nothing for proving it. Let people judge you by your deeds, folks, and not just the fancy ones we put on to impress people. Doing a good or nice thing and then shouting, "Did anyone just see the really nice thing I just did?" is not a thing that will turn anyone on, guy, girl, or whatever. Big pick-me energy. Being nice is the bare minimum. You should be nice to everyone, not just the pretty girls, and you should do it because it's the right thing to do, not because you think it'll get you laid. You have to bring more to the table than just being nice. If women see you being nice to pretty women and standoffish to other women, especially if the other women are the pretty one's friends, they tend to see through that sort of thing. Things you don't think girls notice, but that we totally do notice. 1. You've been asking out or hitting on everyone you know as though at random. 2. Except for the girls who are near or below your attractiveness level. And 3. You have major depression or anxiety and are using dating to fix your personal problems. You don't get special credit for showing the bare minimum of human decency. I know this guy who likes to make a number about how he's a decent guy and a good guy and how women used to respect good men. He's not a particularly good man. He's a man who hasn't committed any crimes. He told me a story about how a girl passed out next to him and how she was so lucky to pass out next to such a good guy who didn't commit the unspeakable act. He then likes to tell this heroic story to people and expects praises about how incredibly well he did and what an exceptionally lucky lady she truly was indeed. He goes on about how he goes to school, knows how to shower, and doesn't drink or use substances numerous times a week. These aren't qualities that make someone a good person or a good man. These are qualities that make you a normal person. If the bar you're setting yourself is that you can function like a normally developed adult, should behave, like making your own money, taking care of your hygiene, following the normal social rules like not being rude to others and obeying the law, and that women should be more impressed or grateful for that, you need to either date someone who isn't able to accomplish those things themselves and finds them impressive, or then understand that the other person is doing the exact same thing. I really don't understand where this kind of attitude comes from. Maybe a product of parents who believe their child is a miracle and should be told so from every single thing they don't mess up. Actual nice guys don't have to tell a woman they are the nice guy. My husband is a kind man, a great man. He never once told me he was a good guy or a nice guy, he showed me. So, if you had to tell someone you're nice or good, chances are you probably aren't. My grandpa always had a saying, "Guys with big Johnsons don't gotta brag about it." I like to think it applies to this situation. That just because you're decent to me, it doesn't mean I owe you anything in return. As a guy, I would hate that so much. Some dude does something nice for you, then throws a tantrum when you don't go south of the border on him? Jesus, you didn't ask him to do whatever he did. If you're only acting nice to get her in bed with you, that doesn't actually make you a nice person. 1. Sometimes, while grateful for the nice thing you did, it's too much. For example, at a place I once worked, some guy asked my supervisor if he could have a little extra help on a project he was working on, and could I, the temp at the time, go and help him. When I got to him, he actually used it as a chance to hand me a rose. So yeah, it was meant to be sweet, but it was completely unprofessional, especially as I was trying to get a permanent job. I also then had to reject him and he turned hostile towards me. 2, if you're only nice to me, especially as a way to get with me, then no, you're not nice. If I see you being nice to other people, then I'm much more likely to see you as a potential suitor. I lost my best friend over some nice guy BS like this. My significant other and I had gotten into a fight and he felt the need to console her and let her vent to him. About a week went by and he began asking if she'd like to meet and talk over drinks. At this point, the fighting was over and we were back to normal. She showed me a message saying I didn't deserve her and that he could treat her better. She deserved someone nicer. Ended up getting into a fist fight with him on my front lawn and we haven't spoken in 3 years. She's still with me and we're getting married next month. To add to the points people have already made, one of the reasons why a woman isn't comfortable coming out and saying, I don't want to date you because I'm not attracted to you, and has to use other softer reasons like, I'm busy, I'm just out with my girls, etc., is because of a genuine fear that things could go south during the conversation, and a guy who seemed nice at first could get violent or start stalking her. Not that that extreme scenario would happen with every guy she rejects, but it only needs to happen once for it to affect her life. One thing most women experience, frequently, this isn't rare at all, is an exchange like this, especially online. Hey, beautiful. Oh, hi. You want to go out sometime? Sorry, I have a boyfriend now. You think you're better than me, you stupid B-word? You're not that hot anyway. I'm not going to do a 4 like you when I'm scoring 8s and 9s practically in my sleep. Have fun being a C-word. We've learned how to soften the blow, and we're afraid of being too direct because that violent outburst would be 3,000 times worse in person than online. These conversations usually start off reasonably nice, and you never know who the violent guy is going to be. They blend in with the other guys, Agent in the Matrix style, so we have to be cautious. If you're not a man who's going to give a woman a negative reaction when you're rejected, I understand being a bit offended or miffed when you just don't get a straight answer, but the thing is, we don't know that when we're saying no. And we're so afraid of the alternative, angry, bitter, mean, or even the potential of the violent response. The situation can go so bad, so fast. And we've seen or experienced it going so badly before. We're not trying to mess around or play games with you, or keep you on the back burner. We're just afraid that if we do straight up say no, we're going to be called fat, ugly, stupid, a whore. We could well be degraded, barked at, or worse, actually attacked. We don't know that you aren't going to turn into a scary jerk in that moment. It can be very weird, scary moments for us. We aren't trying to be cruel or dismissive, but we don't know how else we're supposed to respond without risking our mental or physical health. Guys, please understand that we do in fact like nice people. The fact that you're a nice guy, or so you think, is not the reason someone isn't attracted to you. This is important to note. You get to see if a guy is really nice with how they deal with rejection of any sort. People aren't turning you away because you're nice, it's because you can't necessarily trust that superficial niceness. The 27 back-to-back messages at midnight are why they're turning you away. Desperation is the opposite of sexy, and it very often smells like excessive solicitousness. Reasonably attractive girls are as turned off by a stage 4 clinger as reasonably attractive guys are. You see generosity when you send her a gift that you can't really afford, and she sees pressure play and starts worrying about the strings attached. You see friendly interest when you ask her all about her life and take notes. She sees prying and starts worrying that she can't leave her phone unlocked around you. You see TLC when you want to spend lots of time with her doing all the things she likes. She sees a social vampire of a guy who doesn't have anything worthwhile of his own going on and starts worrying that you expect her to be rich and Amy. You see old-fashioned chivalry when you freak out about her opening her own door or offering to split the check or dealing with a creep without male support. She sees a guy who's so insecure he can't stand the thought of a woman autonomously dealing with a real adult life and starts worrying about the embarrassing scene you're going to cause when an ex-boyfriend drunk dials her. If I'm not attracted to you, you will only ever be a friend. I should note that this applies to nice girls too. 1. If you're interested, tell her how you feel. No, giving hints doesn't frickin' count as not everyone picks up on those. And it doesn't matter how obvious you think it is, it's all up to her. 2. If you don't tell her how you feel, then she doesn't know how you feel. If there's a friend zone, it's your own damn fault. It's like refusing to go set up a set of stairs and being upset that you're not on the next floor. 3. Not every guy she's dating is a jerk. You only think that because you're jealous. 4. Or maybe he is a jerk to you because you've had a crap attitude toward him and acted all possessive of her. 5. And the reason she's always dating other guys is that at least they asked her out. 6. You just might not be her type. 7. Or she's just not attracted to you. There are people you don't find attractive in life. 8. Don't say you know you're her type. You know nothing. It's up to her. 9. Movies and books lied to you. Pining isn't romantic. 10. If you hold it against her that she's not that into you, you're not a good friend. 11. In fact, unless you want to be her friend for the sake of having her as a friend, you're not her friend. 12. If you offer to do things, you don't expect any repayment unless previously agreed on. 13. If you think she owes you bedroom favors, you are wrong. 14. Leonard Lake thought like this. 15. If you want the deed for your money or services, find a working girl or be a sugar daddy. And 16, as someone else pointed out, too many nice guys go into a scary fit when rejected. We all hear stories about this. See Leonard Lake. Don't do this. And finally, if you expect something in return for being nice, you're not a nice person. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out Easy Mode, also linked below, and subscribe. The friend zone is made up. Girls lean on it a lot when they don't want to tell a guy that they're unattractive. If a girl says that she doesn't see you in that way, what she means is that she values your friendship, but that she doesn't want to do the deed with you. End of story. It's not like you got yourself into the situation by being nice or trying to be her friend. If you hadn't been nice, she still wouldn't want to do it. To reiterate, she's not attracted to you. If you want to be friends, be friends. If you're here to do the deed, don't pretend otherwise. Moping and crying about the friend zone isn't winning you any extra points either. Unreciprocated love sucks. We get it. Move on. Yeah, it also kills me when nice guys act like women should just date them anyway because women could never understand how much it hurts to be into someone who isn't into you. Like, the frick? Have a crush love that doesn't get returned is a pretty basic human experience. Men don't own that. Stop protecting us from doing the deed with other people. We're human too, and independent agents quite capable of deciding when we'd like to do the deed and get the deed done to us. If you see us slipping off with a bad boy, it's because we're down to do it, not because our pretty little heads have been manipulated or misled. And if you frame us as children in need of your white knighting, you've no business pursuing a romantic relationship with us anyway, you pervs. Newsflash, doing the deed is awesome. Get on board or get the frick out. Oh my god, yes. I hate it when they say crap like, most guys look at your body, but I'll only love your mind. Or, most guys just want to do the deed, but I'd give you a candlelight dinner and foot massage. Or, girls, stop showing your body. You have to be a lady to marry a gentleman. Most girls take pride in how their body looks and enjoy doing the deed. Even if you're looking for a serious relationship and not a casual hookup, you're still looking for someone who's compatible both emotionally and in the bedroom. Saying stuff like that just sends the message that you subscribe to outdated gender expectations and that a relationship with you would be unexciting and no fun in the bedroom. Women are not vending machines that you can drop kindness coins into until bedroom favors fall out. Womanity is not withholding getting laid from you and waiting for you to say and do the exact right combination of things to unlock the bedroom. Your desperation is repulsive. Women want to do the deed too, but they don't want to risk pregnancy, herpes, or your clingy drama for a crappy bedroom time. She has interests to protect too, and you're mostly antithetical to them. Stop being that. All these are good points, and the narrator wishes he could pass them back to his much younger self when he was just a D-bag nice guy freshman. Thank you for submitting. But what I'm really here to admire is the use of the term womanity. Surprised I haven't seen it before. Being nice is usually the minimum requirement for a partner. For anyone, man or woman, straight or not, who wants a good, fulfilling relationship. Don't think you're clearing a high bar just by not being a total butthole. What else have you got to bring to the table? Work on that. Don't delude yourself into thinking that women don't like to go out with nice guys. Almost every woman who's in a good, loving relationship would describe her partner as someone who is good, kind, and a decent person. So get that out of your head. Only messed up people you wouldn't want to be with anyway are going out with jerks or alphas or whatever else you want to call them. Crushes are often fleeting, so if you're befriending a woman or man to feel them out for dating, make your move quickly. There's a good chance she has a little crush on you too in the beginning. But if you don't make a move and ask her out, she'll just assume you want to be friends and she'll move on to her next crush. 4. Don't get caught up with women who want to vent about their jerk boyfriends. More often than not, this just becomes toxic triangles where she has one guy for doing the deed and romance and one guy for companionship and nobody is happy. Also, see my above tip on crazy people you wouldn't want to be with anyway. Doing the deed is not a right, it's a privilege, and most of all, it's a choice. You don't get to decide for me. You don't have a right to me. I don't owe you a chance any more than you owe some annoying girl you aren't attracted to a chance. You aren't nice, you're making me uncomfortable when you don't back off, and me calling you on your crappy behavior doesn't make me the one at fault. If you were really my friend, you wouldn't make our relationship about your own desire for bedroom favors and intimacy from me. I didn't friend zone you, you crush zoned me, and you're a really crappy friend if you never even want to be friends in the first place. If you pretend to be my friend, then turn on me when I don't want to F you, you're the one who was manipulating me, not the other way round. Not a female, quoting from an unknown source. Okay, you're nice. That's what everyone else should be. The bare minimum of being a decent person. What else? Are you interesting, funny, clever, charming, talented? Because the guy over there is also nice. He also goes to the gym, volunteers, has a band with his buddies, and is applying to law school. He also doesn't put me on a pedestal for having a hoo-ha. He challenges me to improve and be a better person. He doesn't give me everything I want, he supports me as I work towards my goals on my own. So what the hell else are you offering? Being nice doesn't get you any points. Your score is 0. Loser. If you're a nice guy and she doesn't want to go out with you, it doesn't mean she wants an awful jerk for a boyfriend, she just doesn't want you for a boyfriend. I can't count how many times nice guys have lamented they can't get a date because they're too nice, and girls only want guys that are jerks. They usually follow this up with comments about how they should start being jerks so they'd have better luck. I wish guys would just understand that I'm legitimately just being a kind person and that I'm actually a lesbian who's not interested in men. That if you're not attracting the kind of people you're attracted to, then maybe you are the one who has to change. We're human and we get randy and possess an innate desire to screw and get screwed as well. Stop protecting us from ourselves. We're independent agents and not children, and if you frame us as children in need of protection, you have no business pursuing a romantic entanglement with us. If you've ever been ditched in favor of a bad boy, it's because we want to do the deed without judgment and shame, which is a typical, healthy desire for men and women above the age of 12 or so. Nice is the absolute bare minimum you have to be. Self-depreciation isn't cute. If you say things like, "Oh, I'm such a loser," or "No girl is ever going to date me," even in a jokey way, it will not elicit any positive feelings from the person you said it to. It's like a woman saying, "Oh, I'm so fat." Similarly, if you view yourself as a lonely, forever virgin, or the guy who girls just love to friend zone, then it's going to come across pretty obviously to women, and that isn't attractive. Literally nowhere is it written in the stars that anyone has to like you, let alone want to date you. Nobody is contractually obligated to think positive things about you. You have to be a likable person to get people to like you. Sometimes it takes more work for certain people, but if you don't do the work, people don't like you. I don't not like you because you're nice. I love nice guys, but nice guys are usually the ones who don't have to constantly proclaim how nice they are. Wait a minute, you mean I can't fake every aspect of my personality and then be upset when she won't sleep with me? Shocking. Nice guys tend to put women up on a pedestal. Don't do that. I don't want to be worshipped and have my butt kissed, and I don't want to have to try and live up to the idealized version you have of me in your mind. I just want to be treated like a regular human being. If you have to say that you meet the bare minimum, you probably don't, and even meeting the bare minimum doesn't entitle you to doing the deed. It reminds me a little bit of an ad I saw for a house when I was looking to rent. The features it listed included windows and a full kitchen, which are indeed things I expect a house to have. Went to look at the house and indeed meets some of the basic requirements for human habitation, was the absolute best you could say for it. You're not nice and nobody owes you bedroom favors. Women don't like jerks, they like non-socially inept, non-self-congratulating, self-assured, attractive guys. That's it. If you don't fall into at least one of those categories, that has everything to do with your personal shortcomings and nothing to do with the woman you fancy being a B-word. In short, get over yourselves. No one owes you anything, especially in a world where you can get all the bedroom stuff you want for a fee. If you need to do the deed, either get a working girl or get a better personality. If I'm talking to you and seem interested in what you have to say, I probably am. But that in no way means that I'm necessarily interested in dating you or doing the deed with you, because those aren't mutually exclusive items. Talking to you like a person in no way means I'm leading you on, because talking does not equal flirting. Along similar lines, if you act like you want to be a friend, then that's what I'm going to take you as. Don't get angry or cry friend zone when you're treated as my friend and my friend only, because how else was I supposed to interpret your behavior? Expecting anything else is either lying to yourself or to me, neither of which are particularly endearing. Be straightforward with what you want, or don't be surprised when you don't get your secret desired result. Finally, it's a really crappy feeling to find out that someone you thought was a friend was only there to try and get in your pants. You feel devalued and stupid because you've been lied to and betrayed by someone you trust. Don't be that guy, especially if it's to someone you supposedly care about. What's the strangest thing about the UK as an outsider? Saying "way" when someone falls over or drops a glass. People apologizing when passing in front of you at the supermarket. Feels good though.
I'm in the UK from Canada. I can't imagine anywhere not apologizing anytime you mildly inconvenience another person.
UK here, but my American ex seemed surprised that while "let's go for a pint after work" in the US meant "let's go get a drink and then head home," here in the UK it's more like "let's go get smashed after work." Apparently you really mean that crap when you say one drink.
I was gonna deny that, but it's actually kinda true. I live in New York, and when a friend says, "wanna grab a beer?" it means 3 to 4 beers at the most. If we're looking to get sauced, we always just say, "You want a drink tonight?"
This would be a convo with my other half. Me, "Babe, moff out." Her,
"Out, yeah, not out.
"Yeah, babe, just out."
Alright, see you soon.
For context, out being a pub or a mate's house for a few, and out being clubs or a 12-hour bender or whatnot.
Putting an X at the end of their text messages.
I didn't even realize this was a UK thing. I thought everyone did it. Important to note, the levels of affection the amount of kisses provided indicates. X is a casual acquaintance, 2 X's a friend, 3 X's definitely shagging and or in love, 4 X's, anything more than 3 X's puts you firmly in the psychopath spectrum in my opinion. There's a guy I work with and his wife sends about 20 X's after every single message, even if it's just like a sentence long. Something's going wrong there.
Yeah, the meanings of 1 or 2 are a bit fluid, but if you go for 3, that's definitely a leap beyond basic friendship and courtesy.
Now you mention it, a lot of my British friends do this, and I'd never really clicked that it was a common link. Interesting. And I should clarify, despite what a lot of commenters seem to think, I'm not actually British, so I'm being as educated here as any of you are.
I just think the names they give to places are so oddly fascinating, like Stoke-on-Trent or Kingston-upon-Thames or Aldermanbury Square. They all just seem so whimsical and full of history.
UK place names can tell you so much about the place. The Anglo-Saxons were fastidious with some of the geographical naming conventions, so the form of hill they used can tell you what kind of hill it is, whether it's steep, plateaued, etc. So like Swindon came from a name that meant a plateaued hill with pigs on it. Or you can tell whether Vikings had a prominent presence there. Like all the seaside towns up north that end up B are using an Old Norse name element, and Skegness might once have been a home to a very bearded person because of the Old Norse hweg element. Possibly the skeggy bit could also just be a name.
There are some excellent ones in the southwest where I'm from. Budleigh Salterton, Cheriton, Fitzpaine, Westward Ho! The exclamation mark is actually part of the spelling. Lustley Cleave.
All of the accents in a relatively small area. I'm a Brit and I live in the Midlands and go to university. I only live, and grew up, 45 minutes from my uni, but everyone from that area sounds completely different from me, and occasionally I'll have a communication breakdown with the locals as we just cannot understand each other's certain terms or slang. The food alters an awful lot too. At uni, I can get oatcakes really easily. They're everywhere, it's bliss, but back home it's difficult to find any. I'm obsessed with British panel shows. I don't know how people over there feel about them, but I'll spend hours on YouTube watching old episodes of Cats Does Countdown and Would I Lie to You? These are just quality comedy for me and far better than all the dumb reality shows on TV here in the States. Panel shows are popular here, but they're seen in the comedy scene as a necessary evil to get popular enough to go on tour. Watch UK Taskmaster if you want to see the greatest show ever made. Alright, this is wildly inaccurate. Every person on those shows will have been touring and doing the circuit for years.
As an outsider who does watch a lot of them, it seems like panel shows are viewed as a reliable source of income you get to have when you're already popular. Downplaying everything, like, yeah, that's alright food, when in fact it was an excellent dining experience.
It's out of love for the ironic statement. Bit windy in a force 9 gale. You think there's an issue when the house is on fire? You've got red on you when you're covered in blood. Or when things are horrendous. That stiff upper lip. My mate was 30 when she found out that her dad had lung cancer. He deteriorated rapidly while she was pregnant and died just 2 days before her baby was born. I went over to look after the kids so she could deal with the funeral arrangements, etc. When I asked how she was doing, she sighed and said, "I'll admit, I'm not great." She obviously cried, grieved, and talked through her feelings, but when she had crap to be getting on with, she was amazing at powering through what needed to be done. For anyone wanting an insight into British understatement, here's something to keep in mind. In everyday language, not bad means, hey, this is pretty good. It can also mean that something's not actually bad, but not great either. It's down to the tone of voice. Meanwhile, not great means awful in no uncertain terms. For a person to describe themselves as honestly not great or not doing great means their world is out of kilter and they're dealing with an existential crisis which may well haunt them for the rest of their lives and would possibly send others to their knees. Tea and sympathy is required in these circumstances. Using the tube during rush hour as a tourist was like a sci-fi dystopian novel. Everyone was dressed the same and completely silent except for a few people saying sorry to anyone who touched them or that they touched. And nobody laughed when the posh English lady on the intercom kept saying, "Next stop, Cockfosters. Transfer here for Tooting Broadway. Mind the gap." There's actually a reason for this. A lot of dystopian writing was based on English conformity in the world of work. The most obvious examples I can give is Orwell's 1984, where conformity is displayed truthfully among the elitism which still exists in Britain even now. Yep, it's strange being in a country like the UK where we all technically speak the same language, but the subtle differences and new systems make it so alien. And the commuting systems are the peak of it in my mind. Having tea. When I went over to the UK for a holiday, the people who I visited asked me what I wanted for tea. Like an ignorant fool, I replied with rooibos. They were not asking what kind of tea I'd like, apparently. I felt a bit stupid to be honest, but at least I know something new now. Nah, it's all good fun. I love laughing and talking about different terminology and cultures, like chips and crisps, car park, parking lot. Actually, even here people do argue about what tea means. Even bread rolls, buns, cobs. Here in the deep south of England, we use tea to mean dinner. It's just contextual, like no one ever is confused about which tea the person means. I watch a lot of Premier League and thus watch a lot of fan channels on YouTube. I'm amazed at how quickly you guys can pull the most unique insults out of thin air and continue like it's nothing. Lukaku is crap, mate. He couldn't hit water from a boat. Captain, he couldn't lead a pack of ants to a picnic. There's obviously better ones, but I'm not as quick-witted as the Brits, so I'm not exactly doing it justice. But I love your humour and basically everything around football culture. Could fall into a barrel full of breast and come out sucking his thumb was a classic one of these. This is magic. This is how words were originally intended to be compiled. Hate to tell ya, I went to a ton of games a couple of seasons back and we aren't really being witty more than we remember 2 or 3 really solid lines and use them for a variety of players. Plus a big umbrella term for analysis is just calling them wank. Frickin' Ozil, he's frickin' wank, mate. Mesut Ozil in probability isn't actually bad. He's a world-class midfielder and a World Cup winner. However, should he have a bad game, he's thereby relegated to wank until he has a good run of form, which is known as doing alright. If he actually has a good season, he will basically be deified and have songs created about him. See Mohamed Salah for Liverpool the last 2 seasons. Actually, that's something the Terraces, football crowd, does over here that you don't see in America, is songs sung about individual players. They can be good or bad. When I went to see Everton a few years back, the crowd was singing to Tim Howard to the tune of London Bridge is Falling Down. Timmy Howard's got Tourette's, got Tourette's, got Tourette's. Timmy Howard's got Tourette's, frick, crap, wanker. I thought the strangest thing in the UK was the bars and nightclubs with signs saying to not attack paramedics. Unfortunately, all too necessary from what I've heard. For some inexplicable reason, a lot of paramedics have been attacked when trying to help people. I think it's because people fear them getting the police involved if you've got substances on or in you. In reality, paramedics only give a crap what substances you've got so they can try to help you. No use thinking someone is having a heart attack when they really just need naloxone. Such polite insults. I was watching some Brexit crap a while ago, and some fella told another dude that he was screaming across the bar in the most eccentric fashion. American here who's been on and off following Brexit. I love watching the House of Commons and especially Burko. In Congress, there's the idea of order and civility and not talking while someone else is. Over there, there's a whole lot of rebelling and sass, and I love it. I'm British, and the only insults I ever hear are long lists of things that would get you demonetized on YouTube. I was in Bath yesterday, and some dude, probably in his early 20s, quite posh, in a suit, wandering down the main shopping street, having to stop and recalibrate himself every few steps. It was only about 5 p.m. Nice counterpoint to the tourists and the beautiful 18th century buildings. He's just practicing his silly walk. He was on his way to the Ministry of Silly Walks to get a research grant. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out Easy Mode, also linked below, and subscribe. The pub is the most culturally UK place and queuing is the most UK behaviour. Yet there's no queuing for a drink in a pub. It's a mental queue. Everyone knows who at the bar is to be served next. Sorry love, he's before me. Until you get the slag who knows full well he's cutting in front of you and others. The bar staff usually clock who's next anyway and ignore them, or you just have to sort it yourself. Oi mate, not you, and a thumb over to the person you know who was in front of you. As a resident of the Nordic countries, I would contest that queuing is more British than Nordic, especially Sweden. It's like a gosh darn religion over there. I've only been to London, but well-dressed people passed out drunk in alleyways at 11 a.m. Also, the very defined rules about when you can speak to each other. People are very friendly within the bounds of the rules, but literally panic if someone engages with them outside of these bounds. Also, the drinking culture. Just wow. I want to clarify that I mean wow in both a positive and negative sense. A cleaning lady scared out of her mind by 20 drunks in a male bathroom was bad, but being able to drink from a bottle of wine as I wandered around the city with my friend and not have to worry about the cops was fantastic. Alright, now people are writing to me that it's illegal to walk around town drinking, but I will counter that I walked past whole groups of people on the sauce on the sidewalk, so I guess that if the police were enforcing that one, I guess I was the least of their worries. Okay, more people have written into me, and apparently it's not illegal. Good to know. I gotta say that for the most part, I adore the British. Got to say that as a southerner, this is quite true down here, but as soon as you get up north, everyone is much friendlier and loves a chat. I met a dude from up north the other day, and he said the same thing without me mentioning my thoughts, whether positive or negative. He told me that he was very sorry that my whole perception of the UK had been formed in London. As a Brit, reading all of these stories has been a real treat. It might just be lunchtime beer talking, it's Friday after all, but I've really enjoyed myself. Cheers. Constantly making jokes about pedos. Dark humor in general. One of my mates was chatting up a girl in a pub once, and once he nipped to the loo, I went over and told her she'd better watch him as he was a convicted pedophile. She shot off back to her mates and wouldn't talk to him again. When I told him why, he just laughed and called me the C-word. I'm Portuguese and I lived in the UK for 2 years. The use of cheers confused me so much. When I'm supposed to use it? Is it a thank you? A goodbye? A hello? I'm supposed to reply cheers in return? I know it's probably because of a long shared cultural history and that most people live and die in the same areas they're born, but I don't understand the different stereotypes based on towns, cities, and villages. I'm not talking really big generalities like people in the north are friendlier or people in London are more hurried and fast-paced. I'm not talking about large regional differences. I'm talking stereotypes based on specific, very small places. Well, he was from Derbyshire, collective eye roll, so you know how he was. You know how all those Yorkshiremen of a certain age act. All the heads nod in unison. I grew up in Kent, so I was not familiar with how those chavs from Milton Keynes spoke. Multiple harumphs. I have no frickin' clue what being from a specific small town or village means, but it seems everyone in the UK knows all the different stereotypes and idiosyncrasies of every village in the whole gosh darn country. It's basically a class thing. Everyone thinks the next town over is a crap hole, but if the big city 2 towns over says the same thing, then you all unite against them, and so on. Pull cord switches, mostly in bathrooms. Where I come from, we only have attached-to-the-wall switches, except for maybe some super old lamps. One thing I can't wrap my head around is how people go partying wearing nothing but a shirt or small dress, regardless of the weather, which is often quite cold, especially in, winter. I observe large groups of such people every weekend. They're not even carrying jackets or anything, and they're taking the bus. This would be semi-understandable if they took cabs everywhere and literally didn't spend more than a couple of minutes outside. I've been living in the UK for 5 years, and what still gets me is people saying, "You all right?" instead of "How are you?" For me, the "you all right" makes me think I look sad or sick. It's weirdly accusatory, even though I know it just means "How are you?" We have that in Cumbria too. A whole conversation played out as, right, thank you, and most of the time when they say it to each other, it doesn't even seem to be a question. Just 2 people saying all right to each other, not answering the question and moving on to the next part of the chat. Here in Ireland, Dublin anyway, we dropped the you. We just say alright, and the reply is also alright. If you're not alright, you don't mention it. American living in London for a few years now. One of the biggest things is definitely the drinking culture and how much it's embedded in all of society. I thought coming from the States that we drank a lot, but here it's on a different level. It's very common to have a pint or 2 during lunch breaks before going back to work. Pubs are on every corner, and the public drinking laws are astounding for an American. The sense of orderliness and politeness. Brits are amazing, diligent with following the rules. They queue quietly for public transportation, stand on the right, and don't outwardly complain when something goes wrong, though they're the best at tutting under their breath. Keep calm and carry on really is practiced in every part of life here. There's a sense of collectivism that I sometimes find strange when coming from a country that prides itself on individualism. Humor. The British humor relies completely on sarcasm, while American humor is more in-your-face slapstick. They each have their place and time, but sometimes it can feel exhausting to constantly have to unpack British comedy or humor due to its constant push for double entendres, ambiguity, and innuendos. Innuendo. I feel far too British to agree with the above comment and then chuckle at yours. As a Dutch person, the same sense of orderliness really struck me as well. It's like London is insanely crowded hell, though Amsterdam is worse, but everyone is doing their best to make it easier for each other. If the escalator sign says to stand on the left and walk on the right, or vice versa, people actually do what it says. It's amazing. It's great, but it leaves us with incredibly short fuses in cultures that don't have these customs in place. I'm a Brit living in China. I have to drink at least twice the tea I used to in order to recover from my subway journeys. If you would just bloody wait for me to alight the train, there will be ample time for you to board without having to push into me. So I'm British and I have an American friend I compare cultural notes with. One of my weirdest was when I mentioned finding a postbox from Victoria's reign. She was like, "You mean your mailboxes carry information about the current leader of your country?" To which I replied, "Of course they do, it's the Royal Mail." Postboxes note the E, 2 and R and crown at the base, indicating it was placed in Elizabeth II's reign. The royal family, are they just mascots of the UK or do they hold any political power? Officially, the Queen does hold some political power, but she chooses not to exercise it, as she's required to be politically neutral. This is mostly relevant when it comes to passing legislature. Officially speaking, it requires the monarch's consent before a new piece of legislature is confirmed, but no monarch has actually declined to do so in more than 3 centuries. There are some other parts of the process of government that require her consent or participation, but these are mostly ceremonial, such as the opening of each parliamentary session, think of these like school semesters, or the official appointment of the Prime Minister. In most other respects, they do act as mascots, though many of them also manage various aspects of the Crown Estate, which involves managing businesses and charity outreach programs, maintaining property and land, etc. Many of them also hold, or have held, positions in the military, though I think most British Prime Ministers have said that they really valued talking things over with the current Queen at their weeklies, as she was such a confidential, neutral, experienced and pretty wise and level-headed person, except for when it comes to her children. I suspect Charles, if he doesn't pop his clogs before Liz does, will be much more of a pain in the arse. Hi, I'm from Germany and have spent some time in the UK. The one thing that was weird but nice was that people are polite when it comes to using public transportation. One time, the most annoying teenagers on the bus I was on stood up and left their seats as soon as 2 old ladies got on the bus. I find fascinating the current hatred and rivalry between the different countries of the UK. The Scottish government seems to despise the central UK government, which is England-dominated. In fact, it's really weird how even the Welsh, and to some extent the Republican Northern Irish, resent the domination of England in the UK as a whole. Weirdly enough, the English don't have their own devolved parliament, so the UK legislates for the whole of Britain as well as England-specific issues, giving rise to the West Lothian questions. Just a century ago, it seemed that whether Scottish or Welsh, everyone had no problem with being called British back then, when the British Empire was at its peak. Except the Irish, of course. Well, I studied there for a year, and I've been there countless times before, and after, I'm astounded at how much junk food there is everywhere. The first thing I was told when I moved there was, look out for chavs. I didn't know what chavs were, but not even 5 minutes after I arrived there had been 2 chavs fighting outside the supermarket right next to where I lived, with blood splatters still on the pavement when I walked to the supermarket. A little bit later, I learned quickly that you needed to avoid them at most cost. What I found fascinating was that the chavs could be any age, young or old. But the weirdest thing for me with the UK is that for a city to get the status of a city, it needs to have a cathedral. So for a big town like Middlesbrough, they can never become a city unless this is changed. And there are over 200,000 people living there. Hey, pal, sounds like you were at the Teesside Uni. My own hometown, no less. Chavs are a scary type, but they're also quite a complex social group. Not all are equal. Fun fact, Middlesbrough does have a cathedral. It's been rejected for what we call devolved city status since 2012, largely due to mayoral and councillor arguments. UK local politics deserves its own thread. To be a city in the UK, you need either historically to be regarded as a city from before the 12th century or have been conferred city status by the government. Originally, the title of city was likely to be given to places with cathedrals, as they would be important settlements, but it's never been a prerequisite. I live near Brighton and Hove, which was granted city status in the 21st century, but doesn't have a cathedral. What is the most pathetic way someone has tried to assert dominance over you? I always feel like the guys who refuse to make room for you when walking by in the other direction are trying to assert their dominance and make themselves feel like hot crap. I never understood why people do that. I figured out the best way to handle this when I was in college and the sidewalks were narrow. Just stop walking and stand still. Now they're the only ones walking and have to go out of their way to avoid you, instead of them expecting you to move. He tried to drink water faster than me. No one drinks water faster than me. No one drinks a tall glass of water like Gaston. Worked as a lifeguard at a summer camp years ago. During safety training, we had to do a missing persons search, which required all available staff to join hands and walk from the beach to the water as far as we could, while feeling with our feet for the missing swimmer. During training, there was a sandbag we had to find. The guy next to me kept insisting on holding mine in a certain way because I will take the upper hand in this situation, said at me while staring down. Whatever, dude, we're theoretically looking for a drowned child right now. Earlier this year, my boss asked me to do something and then leaned over me and said, "You are going to do it." He was like literally leaning over me because he was 6'8". Dude acted like a cliché high school bully from an 80s movie and was like 40 years old, so I assume he was at some point. Anyways, he quit. I used to tend bar in Milwaukee, and there's nothing that triggers bros more than seeing someone drinking something that they personally don't like. I can't tell you how many arguments began with some guy, always unsolicited or unprovoked, mind you, feeling compelled to judge and educate other guys about what they're drinking or not drinking. "You drink that?" And it goes downhill from there. Nobody cares. Drink what you like and shut up. I was at a bar in Stevens Point, and the barman whips out a skin flick mag asking if I want to read it. "No thanks." "Why not? Are you gay?" He looked as if I'd offended his ancestors by not wanting to read his adult magazine in the middle of a bar. Yeah, I used to know cliché blokey wannabes growing up who had deluded themselves into thinking that this was a totally normal thing to do. Keep it private, folks. No friendship is enhanced by looking at naughty bits together. Literally last weekend, some really drunk dude who I've never met once or interacted with tried to fight me to impress the girls he was with. It was completely ridiculous, and his way of trying to initiate it was just to repeatedly body check me on the dance floor, which I ignored because I thought he was just being drunk and dumb. Turns out one of his friends had to stop him from blindsiding me with a sucker punch to the face, assuming he was able to aim that well. Some people do not mix well with alcohol, apparently. My husband is a tall dude and told me that while at university, he constantly had guys trying to pick fights with him at the bar. It was like they found the biggest guy there was and was like, "Yep, I'm gonna beat him up." My husband is the biggest softy though, so he would just kind of laugh and brush them off. I've worked at bars my whole life, and this is very common. If you're tall, you're a target. It makes no sense and has nothing to do with the personality of the tall guy. It's just what it is. It's even worse for bouncers. The mentality, which is probably subconscious, is that if you're an aggressive smaller guy and you fight a bigger guy, it's a win-win. Either you lost because he's bigger, or you won and took down the bigger guy. It's funny because over the years, I've never had a problem with big guys. The 6'5" dudes are fine. It's always the short dudes you have to kick out. People are weird. A former coworker, he would just stand in the way and refuse to move. Even if he wasn't in the way, he would purposefully get in the way. I work in a narrow kitchen, so you can imagine how annoying that could be. At one particular moment, I was carrying a bulky 20-pound box, and he decided to do that. I pretended not to see him and barreled into him. He fell over and got incredibly mad at me. Started talking about how I have no muscle. It was actually pretty funny. It was a display of the most fragile masculinity I have ever seen. Similar experience. I had a regular keg and one of those skinny kegs on my shoulders. I was hustling to get through the narrow kitchen to replace the blown kegs for the bartender. Idiot guy who did the block game did the same to me, and I definitely barreled into him. He proceeded to jump up and try to trip me in the bar, to which I dropped the skinny keg on his foot. Like, you see someone with heavy crap, don't be a butthole. Not me, but my wife. We were living in an apartment complex, and my wife had just parked her car, was carrying groceries and my 2-year-old inside, and this guy stopped her and said, "That's my spot. You need to move your car now." We don't have assigned spaces, but my wife was caught like a deer in headlights and put all the groceries and my daughter back in the car and moved it, just so he could park his 10-year-old Cadillac CTS in his favorite spot. I always got home from work before this guy, however. I never directly confronted him, but from then on, that parking spot became my spot, and I parked there every single day for the next 2 years. I saw him out and about a few times, but thankfully being 6'1" and overweight and bearded, most people chose not to fight with me, even though I've never been in a fight and would be helpless in a confrontational situation. In junior high, I remember this one bully that would get on his tiptoes and puff out his chest like a gorilla and get all in your face whenever he felt threatened. It was such a funny stereotype maneuver. He did that once to one of my friends as he was trying to start a fight. He'd spread his arms wide and push out his chest while aggressively asking, "You wanna go? Huh? You wanna go?" Without a word, my friend grabbed his collar and pulled him into a headbutt, knocking him to the ground, delirious in one hit. My friend, in fact, wanted to go. Plot twist. The guy was asking your friend to go to the prom with him. Double plot twist. The headbutt was actually a kiss, and the bully swooned. Sounds like my high school. A friend of mine was this short, about 5'6" at the time, built like a little tank wrestler who was a huge nerd. D&D, magic, you name it, he loved it. There was a giant football player, 6'4", who was a notorious jackass. Football player starts harassing my friend, calling him the usual, "I'm a big tough man," insults. My friend asks him to stop. The football player puffs up his chest and says, "You wanna frickin' go, little man?" My friend turns slightly and drives his elbow right into the guy's solar plexus. It's pretty hard to look tough when you're gasping for air like a fish out of water. Forgot to mention my friend had been talking about a new D&D campaign he was working on when this happened. One time at a house party, a few of us were talking to some girls, and one of the guys randomly started talking about how he does MMA. Then another guy joined in, and those two started wrestling in front of the girls. I don't think their shirts needed to come off, but what the frick do I know? Taking off your shirt is proper MMA procedure and culture. Leaving them on could have dishonored their whole family. This happened over D&D when my friend, who owns a store, let these guys we didn't know that well join our campaign. I don't know why I, out of the table, got singled out, but a girl walks in and this guy complained that I didn't order pizza for him. Said, "How about you go frick yourself," when I asked him if he wanted some of mine. Walked over behind me and, playfully, put his arms around my neck. I told him I'd punch him in the face if he did it one more time because I don't know who the frick he is. It absolutely ruined my day. By flicking my boy bosoms. I was standing in the breezeway outside a friend's apartment while in college, and a guy coming down the stairs from an upper floor kinda tripped near the bottom of the stairs and stumbled into me. It was clear that he was super drunk and immediately got aggressive. He was so worked up about being tougher than me that for some reason he started doing push-ups at me, while me and my friends just laughed. Fortunately, his friends came and apologized and took him back up the stairs, but it was definitely the most bizarre assertion of dominance I've ever encountered. His lizard hindbrain is apparently of the Texas spiny lizard variety. They do push-ups at each other to defend their territories, which are frequently suburban driveways. I don't know about no lizards, but I can confirm for y'all that a drunk push-up contest to assert dominance is pretty Texan. I don't know if push-upping spiny lizards are actually a thing or not, and you know what? I don't care to Google it, because finding out that they didn't exist would only be disappointing to me now. Generally, guys purposely bumping into you when you walk past them, especially if they're with friends. My high school was overcrowded, so hallways were always packed, but I always did my best to move for people or turn myself so people could get through. But I realized I was always the one moving for other people, so one day I decided not to move for people, and most of the guys I encountered in the hall would just run into me because they refused to move. Like, just move. My daily commute on the subway was like this. People standing directly in front of the doors and even trying to enter as if you were just a spectre image they can walk through. I used to move out of their way or excuse myself. Now I just do the same and walk through them if they refuse to move. I simply expect this to be an unfortunate normal part of my life going forward, lest I be the one knocked over or missing the opportunity to disembark again. I work in a grocery store and sometimes I help unload the delivery trucks when our delivery comes in on what we call cages. Like a 6-foot cage on wheels, and obviously one that's full of toilet paper will be really light, and one filled with 2-liter bottles of juice are the heavy ones. The lift that lowers them from the truck has that patterned metal floor, and you have to pull the heavy ones hard just to get them off. Now, I'm 5'8" and don't have a lot of weight on me, but I can pull these cages off just fine. But there's a guy who's like 6'2" and is always trying to show how strong he is. So whenever I'm helping and he's there, he always insists that he gets the heavy cages and I get the little guy cages. Everyone agrees he needs to grow up. Guys like that are great though, because you can just chill and let them do all the annoying work if they feel the need to prove something. This is brilliant. Subtly threaten their masculinity and watch them do all the hard work. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out Easy Mode, also linked below, and subscribe. A friend tried to make himself look good in front of his crush by literally putting me in a random chokehold for a laugh. Turns out it was because I was talking to her. I had a girlfriend at the time, we were just talking. It wasn't a chokehold though, it was basically just a headlock, so I decided to correct him. I was fairly oblivious and didn't realize this was a failed alpha move. Creeped the crap out of his crush that he would do that out of nowhere, and she stopped talking to him. Apparently she quite liked him up until that point, so he kinda shot himself in the foot. Because romantic interests respond well to displays of unprovoked aggression and violence, right? Right? I just love a man who can fly off the handle at any moment. Was out having a drink. Started chatting to the guy next to me when I learned that he too is a musician. He then tells me, "You're not a musician. I find it offensive when people tell me they're a musician when they haven't put in the time and dedication that I have." Okay, dude, come down off your ego trip. Jesus Christ. What the frick? How the frick would he know how much time and dedication you put into it? Heck, for all you know, he hasn't put in any either. Frick, he isn't even devoted enough to music to prefer it to feeding his ego. Anyway, here's Wonderwall. I had someone stand on their tippy toes to seem taller when we were talking. Talked about how the MBA program at his alma mater was superior to where I was getting my MBA. For clarification, he doesn't have and isn't working on an MBA, but wanted to be sure I knew he was better because he went to a school with a perceived better program. So when I was in the 8th grade, there was this one kid who hated me for no reason. I was really big for my age, and there was no way this 5'1" guy was going to fight me, so he did something so cringy I have no idea what he was going for. I was sitting at lunch with my friends, and this kid walks up to us and spits in my glass of milk and says in a very commanding tone, "Drink." I just stood up and the kid bolted. Got a good laugh out of it with my friend though. To be clear, I did not drink the milk. You just reminded me of the one time in high school a freshman sitting across from me, I was a senior, decided that bothering me was his ticket to alpha status or something. One day at lunch, he threw a curly fry into my drink and asked me what I was going to do about it. He had just gotten back from the snack bar with a couple of cookies and an unopened bottle of soda, so I just reached over and took those. I didn't really like the soda, and I only wanted one cookie, so I doled the rest out to my friends. He just laughed nervously. Once I realized he wasn't going to do anything about it, I thanked him for the cookie.
Freshman being a butthole. You gonna do something about it? Senior does something about it. Freshman surprised Pikachu JPEG.
When asked about what his hobbies are, he responded with, "Hobbies are for children and single women. I work."
You want to know how cool I am? You want to know how tough I am? I'm so tough that I have no life, interests, or friends.
Oh, fun. Sounds like the kind of guy who'll either work himself to death or suffer a complete mental breakdown 1 week into retirement. The type of person who, after he retires, will have no idea how to occupy himself, so he'll spend his time calling the police over minor noise complaints and hassling his neighbors over where his exact property line is. We had a candidate come into the interview and legit say that he wanted to sit behind the desk because he was going to be the one asking the questions to decide if he wanted to work with us. I think he'd gotten some bad advice about having confidence. I laughed, but our HR manager flipped out. The only time I've ever actually seen her call security.
What was the guy's reaction once he realized it was going so badly?
Oh, he commented, "Well, this is obviously a hostile work environment, blah blah blah."
Was on a 4-hour flight in a 2-person row. The guy demanded to have full access to the middle armrest, would push my arm off it if I ever got near it.
Oh man, I was in the middle of a 3-seat row. The guy on my left was some kind of exec, checking his work email on his laptop. Anyway, after the first hour of armrest jockeying, I just asked him,
"Are we doing this the entire flight?"
He pretended to not speak English. The mother fricker was reading his emails in English and pulled the no hables card on me. He finally conceded the armrest after that. Yeah, I think it's common consensus that the person in the middle seat gets both their armrests, isn't it? It's one of those unspoken rules that you would feel like a jackass for trying to enforce, though. I was walking to my car after school and this guy was getting in his car and just yells at me, "You ugly as frick, bro." I flipped him off without even looking at him and he called me the B word and drove off. How petty do you have to be to tell someone minding their own business that they're ugly? People that shout out of cars are cowards.
Excuse me, they prefer the term scrub.
I was leaving a gas station once with a 6-pack of some craft beer to go watch a game at my friend's house, and a group of college kids were driving out of the parking lot, and one yelled out the window, "6-packs are for," slang word for female anatomy. I guess the amount of beer I was planning on drinking that night wasn't adequate to his standards. Had a dude get mad at me for talking to his girl all the time. I was her econ tutor. I once tutored this truly clueless girl at general chemistry. She wanted to be a nurse and couldn't get past the first class, but whatever, I'll tutor you. She was, however, very pretty. Second tutoring session, she shows up with her boyfriend. Dude doesn't study, doesn't say a damn word the whole 2-hour session, just stares at me and her going over the basics of chemistry. Next class, same thing. Next class, I bring my girlfriend to have a stare-off with him. He got the message and left us alone. If you can't trust your partner to spend 2 hours in a crowded university library without screwing someone else, you probably shouldn't be with that person. I had a guy message me threats on Facebook because I'd been talking to his girlfriend. The thing is, his girlfriend is my cousin and I don't live in Alabama. I guess she couldn't speak to anyone at all.
A friend of mine had a girl send her a ton of nasty texts one day, totally out of the blue. "Stay away from him, he loves me, you're probably an ugly B-word, etc. My friend is the guy's aunt."
Was at a party and was given the task of handing out beers to people. This guy flipped his crap, saying he only drank real beer. Dude, it was cold and free. That's the best beer there is. A guy was mad at me while sitting at a light and was revving his engine. It sounded like he'd held it at the red line, and there was a big crack sound and smoke started pouring out the front of his car. The dummy had blown his engine.
That's when you throw your head back and laugh as you slowly accelerate forward in your 2013 Dodge Dart.
My neighbor in front of my house had a boyfriend that would literally rip his shirt off and come outside every single time I was in my front yard. It could be 7 a.m. or midnight, but it wouldn't matter to him. I could be walking to my car and here comes Mr. Globo Jim flexing all around his yard. He would immediately go back inside when I went back inside. This went on for almost half a year until one day I saw him hop into his mega lifted truck and drive away never to be seen again. He did have some pretty sweet pecs though. I would have spent a day fricking with him. Go outside a while and wait for him to come out, then just go back in until he leaves, then do it again. Make a buff-looking scarecrow and leave it in your front yard. Or like a cardboard cutout of Ronnie Coleman. One night in college, me and my buddies were walking down the street at about 11:30 p.m. We were near a major university on a street that was almost entirely college kids renting. It was Friday night, warm, so lots of people were out drinking on patios, talking, playing drinking games, etc. Generally pretty chill. We're done pre-gaming at home and headed to a bar or something, I don't remember. Anyway, we're walking down the road and across the street there's some people on a patio. They yelled something at us, we weren't really listening, but the tone seemed friendly at least. Woo, yeah, college bro, am I right? Generally, kind of thing. So I yell back, yeah man, cool beans, and return to my conversation. Apparently this guy does not like beans, regardless of temperature, because the next thing I hear is, did you just frickin' say cool beans? And I see this perfect Skylar pop-collar college bro storming off his porch to come across the street at us, looking like I just peed in his Bud Light. I can only respond with a confused, yeah? My group stops. This dude is crossing the street at us looking like he wants to fight. Him? Say it again, bro. What did you just say? Some girl behind him. Just let it go, Blake, or Skylar, or Chad, whatever he was called. They didn't mean it. Me. What? Really? My friend? What the frick? I said cool beans. Get the frick out of here, dude, before I kick your butt. Okay, later, bro. And we walked off the street as he started angrily flexing in the middle of the street while his girlfriend is tugging his arm, trying to get him back into the house. We made it to the end of the block, about 3 more houses probably, before my entire group just broke down laughing at the absurdity of it. I really don't understand it. Was it supposed to be a prank? Was he just a drunk dude looking for a fight? Did he think I was intimidated? I'm not sure. Either way, cool beans and, did you just frickin' say cool beans? Are still a standard farewell among that group of friends. His whole family was killed in a freak chilled beans accident. His girl saying he didn't mean it is the most intriguing part of the story. Not me, but my dad. My dad has season tickets for the AHL hockey team in town. One day he was late for a game and arrived to see a teen in his seat with his girlfriend. My dad kindly asked him to move, explaining that those were his seats. The teen responded with a quick, "No, it's not." My dad then showed him his season ticket and pointed out on the kids' tickets that their actual seats were a few rows up. The kid got up and tried to square up to my dad. My father was just like, "Really, dude?" and ignored them. The girlfriend began screaming at my dad for being a butthole. Long story short, Dad kindly asked a kid to get out of his seat and the kid tried to intimidate my dad for this. What was your, I don't get paid enough for this, moment at work? When I worked at McDonald's, I found out we didn't get paid for closing. We got paid until the store closed. So if it took us an extra hour or two to close, that was unpaid. I wish I knew what I know now, because that is an open and shut case, but at the time I was young and dumb. My first paycheck, I noticed I had a ton of missing hours. So when I asked my boss about it, she told me we only get paid until the store is closed. So that night, I walked out when the store closed. They tried to guilt me into staying because the other team members need me. Frick that. I don't work for free, sorry, especially when I'm already making minimum wage. No thanks, not gonna happen. A similar thing happened to me when I worked at Taco Bell when I was a teenager. During the first closing shift I was scheduled for, after I was done cleaning everything, I told the manager I was ready to clock out and go home. She told me that she still had at least an hour of paperwork left to do and needed me to stay while she did it, since there was a rule that no one could be in the store alone. But she told me to clock out. I laughed in her face and told her, I clock out when I leave. She didn't make me clock out and never scheduled me to close again, so win-win for me. Used to work as a dental nurse. First patient of the frickin' day said he felt sick after having a local anesthetic. He looked sick too. I grabbed the bin and told him if he needed to vomit, take the bin. He held it in his lap and turned, vomiting down the side of the chair and all over my pants and shoes. Of course, I had to clean it up, and of course, they wouldn't let me go home to change. That's disgusting. Surely it's not ethical to let someone work with body fluid exposure on them the whole day. It's also a massive infection risk. When I walked into the room of a confused patient on blood thinners who had ripped out his IV and catheter and had crap and blood on every surface of his room, it looked like a murder zone had been committed. I've been through a lot as a nurse, but that was like going into war. I manage a fast food restaurant, and for me it's always things that have to do with the bathroom. From having to clean up adult magazines with splooge on the floor or walls to people either purposely crapping on the floor, even used hypodermic needles. Same boat here, but with customers instead of washrooms. Swearing at my underage staff puts a real bad taste in my mouth, and I am not nice about it. I don't miss either of these things. Good luck, everybody left in restaurant work. Hope all of your customers start watching The Bear and educating themselves on how hard you work. Psycho camp director lost her crap on all of the lifeguards because we said we weren't coming back next summer. Reality was we all had legit reasons. I was going to take summer courses to graduate early. Another guard was moving to university and was going to work in that city. Another guard got offered a head guard spot at a camp near her house, etc. Nothing that said we hated the current camp, just other things going on. We were told in a group meeting that if we weren't happy there, we could leave and she would find other guards. Following Friday, she calls us all in to tell us what a great job we're all doing and how happy everyone is going on the lake. Tuesday after that, she calls us in individually to tell us we aren't working hard enough and she sees us slacking off all the time. Lunchtime Tuesday, all of the guards walked into her office, told her to go frick herself in front of the owners of the camp, and we all piled into my Ford Focus and went out for beer. Went home that night to a message from the camp owner asking us to give him a call back. We'd all chatted and realized he'd called all of us. Called him the following day and told him what went down. He asked us to reconsider and that he would give us $5 an hour raise and report directly to him. We discussed it and agreed on the condition that Psycho Director apologized to us at a collective staff meeting. She refused and had a tantrum. Camp owner fired her on the spot, escorted her off the property, and we opened the lake back up. F you, Barb. I make $13 per hour on an ambulance. Every day is an I don't get paid enough for this moment. I was working late, like 2 a.m., in the office. My manager said, let's go to the convenience store to buy up some snacks and smokes. She sits in the back and we drive there. After we get our crap, she says, can we swing by this street intersection real quick? When we get to that intersection, I guess she sees a car that belongs to someone she knows, parked in front of her boyfriend's house. She starts to wail, cry, and kick around in the back seat, while my bewildered butt just holds the steering wheel with a stupid look on my face. After 20 minutes of that crap, we drive back to the office, I drop her off, and I go home. What the frick? So she sat in the back seat like you were a cab driver or something. She didn't want her boyfriend to see her up front, guarantee it. She suspected him and the whole plan was to check in a different car. Worked at a fast food place about 13 years ago. This lady in the drive-thru claimed she was missing a sandwich. Our policy was to ask for bags back to verify. I asked to see the bags, 3 or 4, decent-sized order, and instead of handing them back like a civilized human being, she instantly started raging and throwing the food into the window while cussing me out. Guess what one of the items that she threw at me was? Yup, it was the missing sandwich. Crappy people will always try to scam something. Well over 2 decades ago, I fielded a call from someone insisting they were missing an entire 10-pack of tacos on their 20-taco order. I had no problem telling them I'd been making food all day and no, an order like that had never come up on my screen and to try scamming some other restaurant. I get it here like that all the time. No, you don't. You know how I know that? Because I'm here all the time and I've never seen you before and I've never done it like that. I've seen lots of, I'm friends with the owner here, too. Well, I guess I have many friends here that I didn't even know about. Countless times at the go-kart place, summer job, where I work, I've had to put up with special needs kids whose caretakers or parents dropped them off and just drove because they wanted a break from them. These kids, and adults, have a mental age of anywhere from 3 to 15 and many times they are unable to follow the directions that we provide or even listen to us. They are not only a danger to themselves but to the other riders and to us, the staff. An easy solution to this would be for their parents to ride with them in a double and to drive for them, allowing everyone to have fun without having to put anyone in danger. However, that costs money, and they don't want to. One parent even said, why can't you just ride with him? And when asked if the kid would be comfortable with other people, she said he wasn't. I wanted to call her a crappy parent, but I didn't want to lose my job. We can't deny them as they have the physical age to ride, but are hopefully putting rules in place to require parents of children with special needs to ride with their parents. I held nothing against these kids, but the fact is that their parents are responsible for them. If they want a break from them, they could hire a caretaker. Even then, though, I understand that bad parents do exist. However, it is the caretakers who refuse to take care of the kids who are unacceptable. You are getting paid. Do your job. I hope you're calling the cops every time a disabled individual is dropped off without supervision. As someone who's worked with this population, this is dangerous for them and you. Got change thrown in my face at work because a man was upset we didn't have meatballs. Now if I'm working, he'll come in, see me, and walk out. I work at Subway. I work in childcare. There was one time we had one kid who had a diaper blowout, and one kid who spewed everywhere. There's only 2 teachers, so this one has to handle the blowout and one the vomit, while also keeping the rest of the kids away from it all. I work in childcare too. I was the only one watching a group of 14, 4, and 5-year-olds. One of the 4-year-olds spewed, and I spent the next few minutes trying to keep the kids from dancing around the spew, while also trying to clean up the girl who spewed. Thankfully, another teacher came to help me out. I would like to clarify that 14 children is not a ratio violation in my state, Tennessee, US. The state allows a class of children who are ages of 4 and 5 to be at a ratio of 16 to 1. Is this an insane number? Sure. Is it a violation? No. This was in the late 90s. I was working at Walmart at my first job as a teenager. I was floated to the garden department one day, and there was a guy looking at lawn fertilizer. I walked over and asked if he needed help. He said, "Not now, just looking at the different kinds you have." Pretty standard reply from the guy. So I said, "Okay, let me know." I walked away, and then swung back about 5 minutes later. Same guy has proceeded to rip open about 10 different kinds of fertilizer all over the ground and is rolling around in the stuff. He is also taste sampling. I call my manager because I didn't want to deal with it. Security escorted the guy out of the store and called an ambulance in case the ingestion of the fertilizer hurt him. My boss insisted that everybody be at their desks at 8:30 sharp. She made me take roll call on an attendance sheet and hand it in to her every day. She also made me do it at lunchtime when everybody left and came back, and when they left at night. Took roll for a bunch of adults 3 times a day. I don't work there anymore. In my various workplace complaint compilations I've done here over the past few months, there seem to be a couple of special workplaces that go completely fascist on their employees. They tend to have high turnovers, surprisingly. I had a company try to keep me once by offering me an entire grand more than I was taking at my new job. I told them how much it would take to keep me and that while still a raise, I'd be settling for a much smaller number at my new job. It also came with less stress, less management hell, and that I wouldn't be the sole person responsible for advising design, advising sales report, advising sales, advising project management, and advising on sites on how to do their jobs that they needed to do so I could do my one job. I laughed, hung up the phone, deleted all my scripts, and left. The guy that replaced me still asks me for help almost 3 years later now. I worked for the university's horse barn as a teenager. They had some pretty strict rules that I was not used to at other places. Like the horses were only allowed outside for 2 hours no matter what. Could be the most beautiful day and we would have to stop everything we were doing to bring them into their stalls. They were only ever allowed 2 squirts of fly spray which didn't cover their butts. Required to have their halters on 24/7 even in the stalls at night. Our boss clearly had zero experience with animals, or if he did, he just didn't care. One day, while one of the horses was having his feet trimmed, my boss went to pull out a weed whacker from the bottom of the shelf directly next to where the horse was standing. A lot like Jenga, the entire closet of machinery fell onto the horse, causing him to kick the farrier and run. Ever since that incident, the horse was a mess, so instead of hiring a trainer to fix the problem, they just locked him in the stall, all day, 24/7. I quit shortly after that. I still wonder how that horse is doing. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below, and if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out Easy Mode, also linked below, and subscribe. I worked at a Toyota service department for a few months. It was terrible in general, but one day was the worst. During the week, I had a nail go straight through my foot, so I'm bandaged up and have to walk around to get everything. Probably 100 yards to the car wash, 40 yards to the shop, etc. My team for Saturday, 4 people, had 1 person quit on Wednesday and I had 1 person who had a funeral to leave early for. The other guy was new, so he was slow to get stuff done. My boss says he'll come in and help. Wednesday, we lock it at 60 appointments since we have short staff up front and back. We do take walk-ins too. Thursday, it's at 80 and we tell our boss to lock it. Again, on Friday, before closing, we see 110 appointments. He never locked it. Come Saturday morning, we had 130 appointments from 7 a.m. to 4 p.m. I'm having to walk around a lot and ended up bleeding through 3 pairs of socks and bandages. I had to chase down about 80% of our customers' cars because our porters were goofing off. I had 53 opened tickets at 12 p.m. We had a 4-hour wait for walk-ins and 2 with appointments. Haven't had lunch or a snack since they banned food and drinks at our desks. My friend is about to leave for the funeral, so I cover his work and my boss leaves for lunch, throwing his 20-ish tickets on my desk. So I'm 110 tickets deep now, helping the new guy with stuff, moving cars and trying not to pass out. Oh, did I mention 95 degrees Fahrenheit outside, no AC in our covered area, not inside, and 90% humidity? We didn't even get a breeze. Can't have snacks or drinks at our desk either. It gets to 3 p.m. and I'm rescheduling people, trying to get everyone out when their cars are done, but have to limp them down to pull them in front to leave after they pay. My boss still isn't back and the new guy quits. I end up getting in one car and blood from my sock drips onto our paper mats in the car. I cleaned everything out, vacuumed the car, washed it and pulled it up. Customer went ape crap that she saw blood on the disposable paper mat, about the wait, not getting a discount for her non-appointment service and demanded to speak to my manager. That was it. Called him up and sent to voicemail. I explained it to his mailbox, then called the GM to explain that I'd been alone for 3 hours dealing with an uncapped amount of customers. 5 technicians walked out, I'm still not recovered from my workplace injury, and that I'm finishing my paperwork to take my lunch break at 4 p.m. Boss shows up when I'm about to leave to eat my lunch I bought, knowing their provided lunch would be gone before I could set foot in the break room. He told me that in our state I'm not legally allowed a lunch break during a shift, and I have to stay to finish out the customers on my tickets. I mentioned being here since 6 a.m. pre-printing everything, saying I just need to relax, and he said, "You didn't even clock in this morning, so unless you do what I say, you aren't getting paid." Service advisors are paid commission here and percentage of our parts profit for stuff sold. I don't even get 10 cents an hour. So I walked to my station, removed all of everyone's login copies of my permissions, deleted all of my notes, deleted all of my warranty macros, all the spreadsheets, and reset every custom line I added to our programs before I removed my admin permissions. Walked out and got a call when I got to my car asking, "Why isn't your login able to collect credit cards?" So he had to either write down credit card info, take cash or checks, or let them go. My GM asked me to come back at a pay raise and less hours, but I knew it was BS. My boss ended up getting let go in the following months since he couldn't get things back up to speed. My good friend moved to Mercedes parts, so he's happy. I ended up going to BMW for a bit after that and handled a few other franchises later. I worked IT with about 30 other developers and firefighters, supporting a large 3-shift-a-day manufacturing line. When the line computers went down, 300 workers leaned their backs against the wall, waiting for us to get the manufacturing process back up and running. We pretty much had freedom to stroll in at about 10 a.m. Many of us worked well into the evening, often took 2-hour lunch breaks. Most of us were on 24-hour call, which earned us half a day of comp time for any trip to the office, at any time of the day. A new boss was appointed over us. He quickly replaced our casual work hours with strict 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. hours, with a 1-hour break for lunch. Day 1 of his new policy, we were working on a failed mid-range computer on the manufacturing line. 300 workers hanging out watching us. Oops, it's 5 o'clock. Quitting time for us. New boss caught us in the parking lot just heading to the local bar and swiftly changed his new policy back to our standard. Reality sets in, or if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Take your pick. Our productivity and morale was through the roof with the old boss. He got promoted to corporate and company hired a new one. He goes through every single room at 8 a.m. sharp to check if people are working and if the guys that work outside the office already left. Same thing after lunch. Everyone is freaking miserable and performance went downhill. Worst thing is he micromanages the crap out of everything and it always has to be his way. It's a process that has been working and continuously improved, tested and proven to be completely efficient and give results we need? Yeah, forget about that. Let's do it his way because that's how he did it 20 years ago, even though he doesn't know how it works now. Team leaders, supervisors, engineers, nobody has a voice anymore. It hasn't been fun. I've repeatedly heard a saying that you should always give new management time to settle, even if their presence seems oppressive at the start. I guess this one is one of those cases where once you've seen what it's capable of, throw it out and start again. I walked into the bathroom and someone had smeared poop on literally every single surface, wall, everything, except one small part of the ceiling they couldn't reach. PodCast almost made me quit, but luckily my boss told me to lock it, not let anyone else use it, and he got someone to come in with a pressure washer. Pressure washer is a new level of poo smear cleaning. Love it. A few years into my flying career, so definitely not earning what people think pilots earn, I was asked to take a bunch of handicapped children and their carers for a 10-minute flight in a small twin-prop aircraft. All seemed to be going well until after landing when I smelt the unmistakable stench of spew. I looked around and all the passengers were looking horrified as the inside of the plane had been covered in what, I was told, used to be strawberry milkshake. I then had to vacuum and wash down the carpet in the plane. The vacuum died after picking up a large amount of this lumpy white substance and it started to drip back down the nozzle. It was a warm day and that didn't make the smell any better. I mentioned the handicapped thing not because I'm an awful person, but because his learning disability meant that he didn't think to inform his carer of his nausea, so there was no attempt to reach for the sick bag. We used to be paid half salary to attend seminars related to our industry that grant professional development hours. These seminars would often be at 7 a.m. at a hotel that was about a 2-hour drive for me, if I was lucky, in rush hour traffic to get to. But hey, it was paid and had free breakfast, so waking up at 4:30 to attend wasn't the worst thing in the world. The company announced that they believed attending the seminars was furthering our knowledge, therefore helping the company and therefore helping us, so we would no longer be paid to attend them, but we were still expected to go. I just said frick that and haven't attended a single one since then and delete all of the invite emails. I'm paid hourly, so taking the 6 hours out of my day to drive and attend a seminar I'm not being paid for is just plain stupid. I was asked why I haven't gone to any of them and told them I have a mortgage to pay. Haven't been asked to go again since. Direct support staff for people with minor disabilities, $13 an hour. Had a client go off the rails because he refused to take schizophrenia pills, was working night shifts and he gets up in the middle of the night and starts yelling random things, running around the house in the buck, peeing on everything, asking for me to put a cowboy hat on him, and he is now in a nursing home, bless his soul. Was making $2 above minimum wage for a furniture rental store. I was supposed to be a manager in training, but they screwed me and made me a jack of all trades. One day, they asked me to help out the repo runs and get back furniture from people that didn't pay. First red flag was going into an area and taking away a fridge from a family and watching them take all of their food out for their kids and getting friends to keep it cold. The nail in the coffin was going to someone's house at 10 p.m. at night, waking up the family, going into the bedroom of a sleeping child to wake him up so he can take away his bed as his parents didn't pay for it. As someone with young children at the time, I was disgusted in what I was doing. I was putting in 18-hour days doing these repossessions. I asked my district manager what I would be getting as compensation, as I've had to do some very terrible things. She promised I would be well compensated for saving the company a ton of money and product. I got a $15 gift card to buy alcohol. I don't drink. When my boss screamed at me for something they got wrong, this was a couple of hours after two co-workers almost came to blows because one of them left their phone overnight and the other, the first person to arrive in the shop, used it to send a prank text to another co-worker but didn't want to admit it. I work in security, and a bit under a year ago I worked at some kind of public TV event. My job was to keep people without passes out of a specific area which was intended for those working behind the scenes, to kick back, relax and get their lunches and all that. Anyway, the only ones I was allowed to give entrance to were people with passes and other security folks. But then word from above came that the exception was to be made for some kind of supposedly famous child music group. I had no clue what they looked like, so four kids and their parents walk up, and I stop them. "Don't you know who they are?" Quickly followed, and eventually it got cleaned up. And every time they kept bringing in more friends and family members, and the same song and dance continued. I don't think you understand what a contract means. Besides, this is an opportunity for you. When the new manager tried to move me to night shifts, weekends, from my day shifts, workdays, despite my contract being very specific about when I worked. "Hey, you were right. This is a big opportunity for me," was how I opened when I told her I was quitting. The look of shock and 15 minutes of silence on her part were hilarious and the best feeling interval of my entire life when she realized I'd thrown her own stupid words back at her. What does your job ask you to hide from the customers? At the hotel I work at, if a guest found a stray bedbug, all staff were instructed to neither confirm nor deny that it was an actual bedbug. Word games were not fun. I experienced that firsthand. Went to a convention that was infested with cockroaches. Collected a few in a cup, went to the front desk to complain. They reassured me that what I saw was just harmless water bugs and there were no roaches anywhere in the hotel. None. Zero. Nada. Had to ask them if they'd be fine with me releasing these harmless bugs in the lobby. And the moment I said that, they froze and realized that there was nothing they could say or do. My last job was a white-labeled help desk. You had to hide the fact that your company existed at all from the customer. You had to pretend that you were from whatever company the customer was using for their IT. I worked for a monitoring center, and that's really what we did as well. Instead of saying this is avant-garde, we had to use the name of the company. We monitored for medical buttons, like I've fallen and I can't get up, Alert 1, Response Link, Life Protect, EMC security companies, etc. Security systems for homes and businesses, and fire alarms. The thing that made it the most frustrating was when they were doing something wrong on their end, and we couldn't just straight up tell them what was wrong. Like they would press their button to hang up, but it just calls us back again, and we have to be like, "Okay, I'm going to disconnect, you don't have to do anything," while they are screaming that we keep calling them, when it would be so much easier to just say, "We can't call you, the only way we can get in contact with you is if you press your button, so stop pressing it unless it's an emergency." That company was awful to work for. As a tattoo artist, oftentimes apprentices at the end of their apprenticeships will start to tattoo paying customers, walk-ins, and for a few tattoo shops the apprenticeships are much shorter than they need to be. So if you're getting tattooed but someone seems to be young or they seem inexperienced, they probably are, and they're probably still in their apprenticeship, but the shop will tell you they're actual artists. Do your research when thinking about getting a tattoo, and don't be afraid to wait months or even years for the right artist for you. It'll save you from a really crappy tattoo. I think this might have happened to me. I went to a shop with a good idea of what I wanted and was prepared to wait to get it. Surprise to me when they said they'd get me in the same day. It looked fine that day and a few months after, but slowly became obvious they didn't go deep enough in some places and had shaky hands on others. Good news is, about 1.5 years after the initial tattoo, I went back to the shop and asked for the artist, who was still working there. He seemed embarrassed and touched it up with no charge. I tipped him good and it looks much better. Still love my tattoo. A year and a half in the trenches is a long time, especially if he's a naturally talented artist and just needed some time to pick up some tattoo-specific art knowledge and muscle memory. I can tell you he was real glad you came in and let him fix it up. MD in pathology. We're the ones who give bottom-line diagnoses and staging for most cancers and many other diseases. In a weird way, the patient isn't our customer, the doctor is. We're telling them what the diagnosis is and what evidence we have to support it. Anything we can say can trigger them to do a whole new treatment plan or a bunch more tests, so we have to be careful not to mention random things that we see unless we want them acting on it. For example, we might think, "These megakaryocytes are a little small and I see a few more of them bunched together here, but it's only in a couple of spots." If we bring it up, it might seem more significant than that, and trigger a distracting question about one disease process when we know that's not the actual problem. A big part of the training is learning how to communicate the truth without clouding it with more truth. Unfortunately, this often means that the reports are almost unintelligible to the patients, because they're not the intended audience of the report, really. Put that down to a job I would never want to have responsibility for. Either breaking people's hearts or giving them so much information that they don't realize they're in danger is pretty grim. No thank you. The restroom. I work at a small privately owned pet store. It's the most trashy store ever, and the bathroom is a room with a toilet, water heater, and buckets. To use it, you have to go through the back room, which is where we keep the rats and stuff. Basically, it's employees only. Well, one lady asked us to use the restroom, we let her, and she stole a turtle that was being soaked in the sink on her way out. We caught her stuffing it in her bra, but she got away. Now if a customer asks if we have a bathroom, I have to say no. You'd be amazed at how good construction workers become at hiding flaws. It's nearly a part of the job description and a large part of why so many construction efforts is put towards cosmetics, beyond the fact that most people just don't want to be looking at a bunch of rough-in work that's functionally the same but aesthetically atrocious. I concur. I was a finisher for some years, painting, staining, so in other words making your brand new piece of crap house that you paid way too much for look nice. Amazing how many homeowners get duped or just plainly have no idea what they're doing or agreeing to. I've worked at 2 fast food restaurants in my life. At each one, the only time that food safety protocol was followed or enforced was the day that the health inspector was coming in to grade us. I should also note that both stores received 100% every time the health inspector came. Obviously, every restaurant is different. It all comes down to management. The stores I worked at were all about getting food out the door as fast as possible, with the smallest number of people working as possible. That leads to cutting corners. Not all restaurants, even fast food, are like that though. My point in posting was that even though they appear clean or have a high score posted on their health inspection, that doesn't mean they're following all of the guidelines set in place for them. How many people are supposedly working on this really important project? Spoilers, it's just me.
Client, can we add X?
Me? No.
Can we have a discussion on this with the whole team?
You just did. We sell software and we have a page that has instructions on it for setting up Linux servers. But that's basically all we know about the OS and as much as any of us actually care to learn. If asked, the going policy is that our Linux specialist is out this week, but we'll totally refresh what we know by going over the page with you.
Meanwhile, most of us Linux users are thinking, crap, they actually mentioned us.
It does feel like the general principle of Linux is, if you can't work it out on your own, you don't deserve it. I recently just started working at a fairly fancy resort and we just finished renovating a floor of the hotel and a lot of the new furniture had Argentine cowhide as the leather for it. We were instructed to tell guests that it was a fake synthetic material just in case. I work at a deli and bakery currently. All of our food is from frozen and they want me to call it fresh, baked in store every day. Dude, it was frozen for 3 months, thawed for an hour and then cooked. It's no better than anything else you get from the freezer section and in many cases the freezer section is higher quality stuff. At BK, the food is frozen and gets warmed up in an automatic grill, and we're told to tell the customer that the meat is always fresh and there. The last time I ate at Burger King was about 4 to 5 years ago in a food court. I ordered a cheeseburger and watched as an employee literally pulled a burger out of a drawer and shoved it in the microwave. I don't know why, but I couldn't stop laughing to myself. Not now, but back when I worked as an aide at a nursing home, we were forbidden from telling patients that we were short-staffed. We were, and it was the fault of administration because they were trying to save money. But literally the residents would be yelling at us because their shower was late or whatever, and we were supposed to just act like it was because we were lazy. We weren't allowed to tell them it was because I had the entire wing by myself. The administrator was sick of having angry family members calling to complain and decided we should take the brunt of it instead. Have some of the same issues at my job. As a CNA, I'm able to explain to them that we're doing our best, and that I'm sorry for the delay. But on days where we're understaffed by more than 2 people, I tell them. There's no other way to get them to understand. But at my job, it's got the opposite effect. It makes the admin keep us properly staffed for the most part. Best of luck. Being an aide is like no other job out there.
I'm a pharmacist for a major chain. We were recently told this from our district manager because we kept getting reviews complaining about longer wait times and that we needed more help. Apparently telling patients that filling their scripts would take longer because I was the only one working that day is a big no-no.
Cell phone store. Customers returned perfectly good phones all the time. We were told to sell the boxes as brand new, first-time activations and purposefully leave out the fact that they had in fact already been activated and taken home, within 48 hours. I'd be teed off if I brought a phone full price and it was even slightly used. I let those phones get dusty and would never sell them despite that crappy policy. I used to work at one too and we also did that as well. I think the thing that annoyed me the most was the push to sell the accessories just because it was on a daily basis. I understand the need to sell accessories, but what I didn't understand was the need to sell accessories that do not fit the phones. Like, is it that hard to find accessories that actually fit the phones to their exact model? For example, if you wanted a screen protector, it was either going to fall short around the edges or be too big where we had to cut it so it would fit. It was worse for tempered glass because it was more expensive. I loathed every time I had to sell one. If I didn't, I'd get in trouble and get scolded for not hustling enough. I worked at a small town store, so I knew a good chunk of people and felt terrible selling them. I only sold them whenever managers were present, otherwise I'd just tell customers to order off of Amazon. Screw that place. I love that complete refusal to be a sleazy salesman. Although if someone has got to 2020 without realizing that everything is cheaper online, I feel like you might have just doomed them to a massive online shopping spree when they see the prices there. Our sales prices are just normal prices. Had to stock some pressure washers a few months back. They're $199 each when scanned. The next day I have to put up more, scan them, and they show up as $279 each. Couple of weeks later they're on sale for $199 each. Just to make things clear, they raise the price for a couple of weeks before putting them on sale. They don't just add a sale sticker to it. This isn't with everything that's on sale. Some things are on sale because it's literally just, oh crap, we have too many of these things and nowhere to put them. Or we have a ton of product related to the spring season and now spring is over. Those are actually at a discounted price. There's a guy locally who owns a furniture store and every one of his commercials ends with, "Come to so-and-so furniture where we don't mark it up just to mark it down and call it a sale." I didn't know that was a practice until his commercials started airing. How does that work out for him? Wasn't there a store that also tried to do this and lost lots of money because it turned out that customers love getting lied to? You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out Easy Mode, also linked below, and subscribe. Let's just say our technology doesn't come close to meeting its process guarantees, but we can give a customer a phone book-sized excuse of why it's their fault. I can't tell which of our vendors this is. Any. Literally any. Out of both healthcare facilities I've worked at, they both made a big deal about not expressing how short-handed we are to the patients. Same at mine. I told them anyway because they wouldn't risk firing a great employee when they're already short-staffed. Not in my current job, but when I worked in retail, we had to process waste food off the floor, waste food being fresh items that had been reduced on their use-by date and then wasted or removed from our stock level because the company didn't want customers to see how much food was wasted. It was a lot. We could process damaged items on floor or items that had been taken out of the fridges and dumped elsewhere by customers but not out-of-date or end-of-life products. We did trial giving our waste food to local homeless shelters, but head office stopped it because it wasn't viable, which I took to mean there wasn't any money in it for the head office. So I pushed them and they said that they were worried there might be lawsuits against the company for giving out-of-date food to people. We could accidentally poison someone, etc. I'm talking trolleys of food. Liquids were poured away and written off, food was placed in bin bags and thrown in huge bins around the back of the store that were locked to stop people digging through them. Some of my colleagues would pour bleach or industrial-strength floor cleaner over it too. I had a problem with wasting so much food and thought the excuses head office gave for not allowing us to donate was rubbish. It was all about bottom line for them. The company itself makes a lot of noise about how environmentally friendly and green they are and how much work they do for charity, when behind the scenes it wasn't like that at all. They had a really crappy attitude towards their staff in general too. I was glad to get out of there. Food retail is the worst retail sector to work in. Their reason for not donating is BS, at least in the US. There are laws to prevent companies from being sued over donated food. I'm a cashier and everyone needs to keep the override card over a mysterious button that is next to a till at customer service. It's attached to a big red light and has a wire connecting it to the phone. Nobody knows what it does and we don't want to find out. That sounds an awful lot like the 911 button that summons the police in case of robbery that many restaurants have. Restaurant employee here. Staff is almost always sick because we get in huge trouble if we take a sick day. Not uncommon to have servers or food expediters throwing up while at work. Strep throat, colds, other contagious diseases, illnesses are always going to show up around the workplace. Mice. We have mice. All my past food service jobs have had mice. Assume any restaurant you eat at has a mouse problem. Yep, I have pneumonia and was in the hospital for nearly a week. My store manager kept texting asking if I could come in every day. It's like, yeah, I can't breathe, so go F off. They don't care what you have and will try to make you work even if it's contagious. I get running a business because that's what I was doing for nearly 9 years, but some things these inexperienced managers do is ridiculous. Also, were the mice cooking the food using human marionettes? Well, my job has us hide the sous vide circulator from the health inspector. What? Why would the health inspector care that you guys are using a circulator? Unless it's filthy, then just clean it. If anything, sous vide is a cleaner way of cooking, because all the good food is cooked in a bag. Because in North Carolina you have to do what's called a variance to be able to do that. It's so that the health inspectors can make sure you're doing it safely. My workplace does not have the proper variance, therefore they'd get heavily dinged on the inspection. I work at a package store, liquor store for all you non-New Englanders, with a pretty big wine cellar. It's pretty cool, but we can't go down there alone because it's absolutely chock full of snakes. They're only garter snakes, and the reason they've let it continue like this is because they're keeping the mice population at bay. We have a buddy system rule because our managers are terrified someone's going to get bit one day, but for the most part they leave us alone. You guys need to get some super high boots. Yeah, those can fit way more snakes in them. Garter snakes are babies, and I've only met aggressive ones in captivity because of the dumb owner. I've yet to meet an aggressive one in the wild.
I remember driving to my dog park, which is located on a mountain. I saw a huge one curled up, sunning itself on the road. I literally just picked him up and put him on a boulder and the sun, and he was looking at me like, "What the frick, dude? I was comfortable there." But other than that, he was still chilling on the boulder when I drove back down. Keeping snakes because they keep the mice at bay brings to mind the Simpsons ecosystem of using killer gorillas to kill the mongooses, to kill the bird-eating lizards, to kill the pigeons. God, try saying what I just said 5 times back to back. If there's an issue with medication, too many pills, not enough, wrong, we're not allowed to tell them. We just have to leave the room with the meds and call our bosses to fix it. It's pretty easy for them to figure out what's been going on, as it's kind of obvious, but we're not actually allowed to say that an error has been made. We're not allowed to be seen sitting. I'm a theatre usher. I had a job as a busser, and we were never given breaks. Had a shift that averaged 6 hours, and we're not allowed to be seen talking to servers casually. Sitting, and at the tail end of when I worked there, we weren't even allowed to sit in the back. We had up to 10-hour shifts where we had to stand without breaks and look busy. I never realized how much I hated that place until a few days after I quit. Work in security. Any and every unique location to commit a crime you'll get away with. The first time anyway. We don't get the funds to have real cameras over the entire mall, so we move them to blind spots where we suspect based on following other footage of the crime being committed. Then we wait for your stupid butt to go, "Wow, that was easy and nothing happened," and go for round 2. I've talked with peers in Target, Walmart, almost all over the place, and this is a constant. While there are certain high-risk zones that always have functional cameras aimed at them, if you wander off to an odd corner, odds that you'll get away with it time 1 are really good, provided you dodge the employees at the time 2. Oh, and along the same vein, park your stupid frickin' car at a different parking lot if you're robbing. This is how we get you, your license plate. You don't even need a mask or a hoodie. Odds are we'll never figure out who you are if you just straight up walk out with crap and off the property. I had a job which claimed all their dressings were homemade, so we had to go back to fill the couple that were not. Also, they would say that none of the desserts were frozen by keeping the freezer for the desserts, and everything else above the standard temperature for a commercial freezer. Everything. Where do I even start? Really, the only thing I'm allowed to tell the customers is the spiel about the place and where the restroom is. I really wish I could help people more than I can, but management actually trained me to actively hide things from people. Literally, I'm supposed to make the customers' lives harder. If I don't do it to management's approval, they go and hide even more things. Then again, I work in an escape room. They had us in the first half, not gonna lie. Current job I'm at told me to lie about the failed maintenance and the budget cuts in my job. At my old job at Walmart, they told me to lie about the malfunctioning fridges and cooled produce that would sit out for 8+ hours before being put into the coolers. When I worked at McDonald's back when I was at high school, there was a time I accidentally filled up a medium soda cup instead of a small for a drive-thru order. I was about to dump it when my manager takes the medium cup from my hand and poured it into a small cup, and it fit perfectly. The small and medium cups are the same volume, just different shapes. They do that at Applebee's too. If you buy a large beer, you're buying a small in a longer glass. My friends asked why I only ordered the small, and when I showed my friends, the waitstaff had a hard time explaining why they were spending more on what I was getting for half the price. Well, this is kind of weird. So my family owned a small bodega, and across from us was another bodega. We had this ripped-up blue chair where the counter was, so my grandma, mum, or me, and my brother could sit in between bagging stuff. Every time this old man, middle-aged man or his wife came in, my mum would slowly lower the chair to the ground so they couldn't see. I was a kid and thought it was a game, so I would help. Didn't realize it was weird until I became a teenager. I asked my mum why, and she was reluctant to tell me that they stole the chair from that old man's bodega from when they fired her before I was born. I find it hilarious. In case you're wondering, the old man, middle-aged man and his wife, the old man's son and daughter-in-law, weren't that petty and came in to buy stuff they didn't have at their store. They were also friends with my grandpa. Your fancy catered event? That's tap water. Bonus if your event is done by a company based in a university, because your food is probably the same food that is being served in the cafeteria. I work with artists and bands. On the last tour, I couldn't tell fans that the artist just didn't want to meet people at the bus, or if she was or wasn't on the bus. She had a paid-for meet and greet, so if they really wanted to meet her, they should have paid for it rather than wait outside near our home on the road. I think that's reasonable. Whether her meet and greets are paid or not, a lot of venues now have security screening, and that might prevent or discourage anyone with Selena, Dimebag Darrell, Christina Grimmie, John Lennon type ideas. It's just good sense to meet fans in the most controlled environment available. What fact were you taught in high school that you later learned was completely untrue? All of the chemistry, about 3 times. Electrons are little balls that circle around the nucleus. Just kidding, electrons move in these little clouds around a nucleus. Just kidding, electrons move in these different hybrid clouds. Just kidding, electrons are clouds. Just kidding, F you. Also, light only moves in straight lines except when it doesn't.
Our gym teacher told us your body temperature increases by 40 degrees when you run. When we pointed out you go to the hospital with a fever of 103, she told us it was different and to stop acting smug.
That's why she teaches gym.
Maybe she confused temperature and heart rate? The sun is half star, half planet. I had a middle school teacher who told us that Buddhists have to pray to Buddha 3 times a day. Took me until high school before I realized he was probably thinking about Judaism.
You can't take a bigger number away from a smaller number.
Oh my god, yes. I remembered when we learned about negative numbers.
I was so gosh darn teed off and upset. Nowadays, I tutor young kids, and when this question comes up, I will take the time to try and explain it in a very simple way that won't cloud or confuse them. One time, though, a kid got excited about what he learned and showed it to a friend and came back to me next week and said his teacher said I was wrong and that it's impossible to subtract big numbers from a small one. Come on.
I can understand a teacher not wanting to confuse kids with negative numbers when they're just learning subtraction, but to straight up lie and say that it's impossible to do it is abhorrent. What's wrong with saying,
yes, you can do that, and you'll learn that another time, but right now we're only going to subtract small numbers from bigger numbers?
And if a kid actually learns how to do it, that teacher should encourage them. Thanks for being awesome and teaching the kids the right thing. I remember this being introduced quite early in my education, but it is entirely possible that that's just a different country's education system. Also, basic negatives are a very important concept when it comes to personal finances, stating the obvious for those who haven't considered it.
In Of Mice and Men, Curly wore a leather glove filled with Vaseline. Our teacher told us it was so he could beat his wife with a softer hand. She was too embarrassed to tell us it was for getting busy.
Am I the only one who finds it sad that beating his wife is more socially appropriate answer than doing the deed with his wife?
That's America for you. There's even a joke about it. How do you allow an undressed woman to appear in an American movie with just a PG rating? Put a lot of bullets through her.
There was a scene in Hannibal, a very violent and gory TV show, where a man and a woman's skin is peeled off their backs and raised to look like wings. The two were au naturel in this scene, shown from behind and waist up, but the network had an issue with the fact that the man's butt crack was ever so slightly visible. The show's solution? Give him a line of blood dripping down his back to make his crack less visible. I'm not even joking. Benjamin Franklin discovering electricity by flying a kite with a key on it.
No, he didn't discover it, he invented it. The phenomenon of electrons moving around never happened until he flew that kite.
Just like fire never existed before the cavemen, right? Adults kept telling me that people would offer me free substances.
You want some dip? No thanks, I don't do dip.
Good, don't start. An actual conversation I had. In 7th grade health class, we were learning about pancreatic cancer and the disease's other variants in other parts of the body. My teacher explained to the class that it can be only located on or in major organs. A few seconds after he said that, I raised my hand and said, "My grandpa had surgery to get it removed in his knee. A knee isn't a major organ, is it?" And this teacher thought about it for a minute and realized he was completely wrong and just responded with saying, "I'm not sure, let's move on."
Oh crap, the knee is a major organ. We're screwed.
Well, to be fair, I'm sure he didn't have it in his knee, but maybe bone cancer in his knee, or something like that. I obviously don't know all the different types, but I'm pretty sure it's always on an organ, major or not. Many of you have been trying to correct me that bones are not organs, but apparently blood is not an organ. So if you absolutely need to find a way to correct the statement I said I was pretty sure about, you can cite leukemia. Cracking your knuckles will give you arthritis.
I was doing it regardless of that myth. It's not like I didn't believe it, but sometimes you just have to crack your damn knuckles because your hand has a cramp or something. Very relieved to find out it was a myth.
Men and women have a different number of ribs. Also some stuff about the Antichrist, but I didn't believe that.
That everyone believed the world was flat until Columbus proved them wrong.
Additionally, that Columbus went to his grave not knowing that he hadn't landed in the West Indies. If I recall correctly, there's a diary entry written by him acknowledging that what he had landed in was a new continent. I'm literally 100% sure that some Greek dude proved it was round by sticking a stick in the ground and measuring some angles and shadow lengths. Also, Magellan was yelling that the world was like a melon years before Columbus sailed. Was taught about Magellan's yelling in history class in middle school. Apparently Magellan wasn't old enough to do any reasonable yelling when Columbus went sailing. So add that to the list of things taught wrong. Apparently the Greek dude already knew the world was round and was trying to figure out the size of it. Add that to the list. The entire rhyme, which I've now learned is incorrect, was taught to me in middle school. It goes, Columbus sailed the ocean blue in 1492, while Magellan was still yelling that the world was like a melon. Everything about chemistry. In grade 9, we were introduced to chemistry. Then in the later grades, they were like,
everything you were taught was essentially wrong. We did it to simplify things. Here's how it actually is.
Then in university, they go,
lol, everything you were taught in high school was wrong. It's actually like this.
Looking back, I wasn't bad at chemistry, I always did well. But because of this constant flip-flopping, I'm still confused about some of the basics. For example, acids.
I remember taking the AP Chem exam, and my sister was in college studying biochem, and I heard her say to her friend, "Gen Chem is a lie." After that, I started searching for clues. I finally got it when, after the unit on ideal gases, I asked why they're called ideal gases, and realized everything we just learned basically didn't apply to real life, but only a very small percentage of things. Or they'd always say, "There's an exception to this rule," and then it turned out mostly everything was the exception to the rule. I was so irritated.
Actually, the ideal gas law is a pretty good approximation of the real thing in most cases. You'd be surprised. It isn't wrong, it's just not 100% accurate. However, it is a useful tool for thinking about how gases really do behave, so it's not a waste of time to learn it at all. Basically, it's as though you first learned that pi is equal to 3, and then in high school learned actually it's 3.14, then in college learned really it's closer to 3.14159. Were any of those things actually wrong? Not really. None of those things are totally correct either, but then why would you bother memorizing 500,000 digits of pi? What would that get you, really? I was today years old when I was hit with the knowledge that ideal gases are an approximation of a pure gas instead of how most of it is found. I guess you learn something every week with this job. That you have to round up all the numbers after the decimal point. Example 1.07883666272, round the 0 to a 1, the 7 to an 8, 8 to a 9, etc. That people in slavery were paid, just not very much, and they were given a choice between a penny and a dime, but chose the penny because it was bigger, as if that was somehow less racist. What the frick? It's illegal to sell yo-yos at yard sales. You only use 10% of your brain. Fricking liars. That the ancient Romans had places called vomitoriums where they would go and gorge themselves on food, then spew to make room for more. Gross, right? Kind of like that one scene in Catching Fire. Vomitoriums were actually a sort of hallway designed for spectators to exit the Colosseum and other arenas as efficiently as possible. I never knew that. They did show us pictures of big rooms with a lot of holes around the walls. Turns out those were public toilets. I simply assumed the vomit room looked slightly different, but they printed the wrong picture. Also, so many erroneous pictures in schoolbooks. So many. As a Latin teacher, I constantly have to correct students, teachers, and parents about what a vomitorium is. The most common response I hear is, "But it's in the Hunger Games books." Yeah, those are about a fictional society. That there wasn't any air combat during World War I because the planes were only used for scouting. What about the Red Baron? Didn't a lot of planes back then essentially try to kill each other with handheld pistols fired from the cockpit? In the earliest days, yes. It gets a lot more sophisticated pretty fast, especially with the development of synchronization devices that allowed automatic weapons to fire through propellers. As a teacher, I have a few rules for myself to avoid becoming one of these teachers. 1. Always admit you are wrong about something when you are. It's important for kids to know you're fallible, like everyone else on the planet, and that it's okay to be wrong about stuff every once in a while. 2. Use discussion paired with internet searches to try and find what the correct answer actually is. I teach second grade, so we don't exactly have to go to Google Scholar, but we definitely go over the importance of checking over multiple sources and not believing everything we read on the internet. 3. Teach kids that it's okay not to know something or have a misconception about something. The pursuit of truth is infinitely more important than knowing something outright. Although it's not embedded in our curriculum, I take time every day to explicitly teach critical thinking skills. I actively do this too. Thanks for letting me know that there are teachers who know how to be wrong and how to fact check and be open to multiple interpretations. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below, and if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out Easy Mode, also linked below, and subscribe. George Washington cut down a cherry tree. Also not exactly untrue, but I have no idea why we need to practice recorders. I think recorders are probably the simplest, cheapest wind instrument, and teaching music is healthy, exercising a kid's brain in a different artistic way. Usually this is taught in the 4th or 5th grade, so by middle school they can choose a complicated, specialized instrument and join band or orchestra. That I wouldn't be paid to stare out the window all day. I'm a pilot. My 7th grade health teacher, "Black people can't swim. Their bones are much denser than ours. I've seen black kids jump into the pool. They just sink like rocks." Imagine my surprise when moving away from Union, Indiana. Oh my god, when was this if you don't mind me asking? My health teacher in the 7th grade told us all Native Americans have high cheekbones. If someone has high cheekbones, they're native, like Michael Jackson. Where in the frick are these 7th grade teachers being educated? Is anyone else a bit nervous there's a Klan university that we don't know about? Blood is blue when it's inside your body. When I was in 6th grade, the smartest kid in the class told us this. The kid was legit smart in math and was many years ahead of us. I disagreed. Everyone else agreed with the smart guy, even the teacher. I asked how come when doctors draw blood, it's red. He said because there's oxygen in the needle and that it turns the blood red. Fair enough. I then asked how would anyone know it was blue. He said something about vacuums. At that point, the class lost focus. I lost, he won. He is wrong though, and I'm vindicated. While silly Americans spent millions building a zero-gravity pen that could write in space, the Russians used pencils. Actually, NASA programs previously used pencils, but because of the substantial dangers that broken pencil tips and graphite dust posed to electronics in zero gravity, the flammable nature of wood present in pencils, and the inadequate quality documentation produced by non-permanent or smeared record keeping, a better solution was needed. Russian cosmonauts used pencils and grease pencils on plastic slates until also adopting a space pen in 1969, with a purchase of 100 units for use on all future missions. NASA never approached Paul Fisher, the inventor, to develop a pen, nor did Fisher receive any government funding for the pen's development. Fisher invented it independently and then in 1965 asked NASA to try it. After extensive testing, NASA decided to use the pens in future Apollo missions. I was always fed this one with varying degrees of smugness about how stupid Americans were, by my science teachers no less. Turns out the Americans were making a calculated decision to not get graphite in their instruments. That there were different sections of the tongue for salty, sweet, sour, and bitter taste buds. I remember testing this myself once. I took some piece of candy and stuck it on a sweet zone, then on some other zone and thought it tasted exactly the same. Even as a kid, I wasn't sure about the legitimacy of this claim. We did this during Girl Scouts. Everyone was like, wow, it works. And I'm sitting there like, sure. This was a very popular science experiment in schools and youth groups, probably repeated millions of times and demonstrated the conclusion even though it was absolutely bogus and in fact completely untrue. It should be a warning about the power of assumptions and a reminder of the effort required by scientists who actually do meaningful experiments and get valid results. It isn't easy. Because teachers convinced us that you couldn't begin a sentence with because, I believed it to be true. And they told you not to start a sentence with a conjunction, and that hell would make a special room for you should you decide a proposition would be a good word to end on. Ending a sentence with a proposition is something up with which I will not put. Winston Churchill. Back in 7th grade life class, my female teacher and mother of 3 told us that girls cannot have a climax. Looking back, I honestly feel bad for the woman. How can you go through life and have 3 children of your own without ever knowing that you could have a climax? 1. Future employers will see how many detentions you've had during school. 2. There are 52 states in the USA. This was a mistake in a textbook, so this was taught to a whole generation of Austrians, probably also Germans. 3. In a geography class, a student asked why the north of Ireland was a part of the UK. The professor replied, because Ireland gave it to the British. Coming from a very patriotic Irish family, this was a shock to say the least. 4. High school students told me how professors in college and university don't help you with anything and you're completely on your own. After explaining difficulty I had with one of my papers to my professor, he gave me the names of about 5 to 6 authors he knows who write on the subject and essentially gave me half my research. Another time, a professor actually loaned me a copy of the book the library was out of, so I could photocopy a chapter I needed for my final paper. Most of my professors would answer questions over email or after class too. In most cases, professors help more than high school teachers. I knew it at the time, but my science teacher in the 8th grade taught that the Big Bang Theory was the idea that the moon was formed by a collision between Earth and a Mars-sized asteroid. I told her this was not the case, and her excuse was that it was simplified so that everyone could understand it better. To be clear, I know that that is how the moon was formed, but the teacher was trying to say this was the Big Bang, like the beginning of the universe, even wording it as such. Yes, the moon and the modern Earth were formed by a massive impact between proto-Earth and another object called Theia. This is, however, not the Big Bang Theory and was not the beginning of the universe. First year in college, the year was 2000. My intro to Comp Sci professor looked at me with 2 heads when I asked him if the exams were open book. His response, after the shocked pause, was something along the lines of, "Do you think you'll have access to the book when you go into the real world?" It was my time to mirror his look of shock as I'd completed my 2nd year of co-op employment through my trade school where I was employed as a DB admin and web developer and had not only books to reference but also w3school.com bookmarked in Internet Explorer 6. In kindergarten, the teacher's aide told us that north is always forward no matter what direction you're facing. During recess, I figured out which way north really was and told her. Her response was, "Only if you're facing that way." I think she thought that we were unable to understand north, south, east, west, and she got really mad at me when I proved her wrong. Until she was eventually fired a few years later, she tried to punish me with anything possible. For example, when I talked during lunch, she moved me to a different table. Some motherfrickers are always trying to ice skate uphill. Trolling before the age of the internet. Also, when you see the moon, that's actually the sun after the Lightmaster General has turned down the dimmer for the day. Tell all your parents about our recent budget cuts. that the Vietnam War was a tie.
That's putting it pretty generously.
In fairness, the Viet Cong haven't reached DC yet. To be fair, there's a substantial number of people both in the States and abroad who either just don't know who won that war, or who outright think that the US won it. It doesn't help that most Vietnam War movies tend to end in one battle that the US comes out on top of. Was taught in middle school that the US has never been invaded outside of Pearl Harbor. War of 1812, Britain used troops from Canada to enter the US. We surrendered Detroit. Later on, British troops burned down the White House. Remember the famous painting of George Washington? It was rescued from the fire from Dolly Madsen. World War II, Aleutian Islands. A small Japanese force occupied the islands of Attu and Kiska, but the remoteness of the islands and the difficulties of the weather and terrain meant that it took nearly a year for a far larger US and Canadian force to eject them. There were also reports of German World War II U-boats off the East Coast and Japanese balloon bombs in Washington state. I was in my early 20s when I started learning on my own about history. Went to private Christian school. The one I always got was, when you're out of college and in the real world, you need to be firm with your faith. People will challenge you left and right. Professors might try to debate you and break you down, and other people will be bombarding your faith everywhere you go. Thanks for the scare tactics, but the most conflict I've had was with a classmate, and it went, "Oh, you're Christian? I was raised Catholic, but I'm an atheist now. What did you get for number 7? Instructor at a state school here. If anything, most of us are terrified to even touch on the topic of religion in class, for fear of bringing up a debate where nobody is going to budge. If we come out as religious, we're prejudiced. If we don't, we're queer, liberal, atheist, hippie feminists who would love nothing better than to rip your faith to shreds in front of you. It's a lose-lose, man. I just pretend like it doesn't exist, and I teach in the humanities."
You're telling me teachers don't like to bring up complicated discussions that inevitably lead to everybody getting really angry, tons of drama, and waste a lot of time? Weird.
I discovered in college that the more know-it-all you were about your beliefs on religious subjects, the more pushback you got from everybody else. You can be religious like Mr. Rogers was religious, and nobody will want to argue with you. You can be religious like Fred Phelps was religious, and people will get in your face all the time. That you don't have any rights in school. Like at all. No freedom of speech, no freedom of expression, nothing. This was in public school in the early 2000s.
I mean, your rights are limited though.
I remember being in a grade 10 science class and learning that everything I learned in grade 9 science was a lie. From what I understand, sciences are just one of a long chain of,
okay, it's not like that, it's actually more like this.
Wikipedia is a terrible resource that's often inaccurate because literally anyone can instantly change literally any article. Wikipedia checks every edit within 24 hours if I recall correctly, and they definitely screen new users somehow. I tried editing a small backwater page once for craps and giggles, and my edit never happened. More importantly, Wikipedia has stood up to every instance of cross-referencing that I've done, and I've written a decent number of research papers.
Whenever I was told I couldn't use Wikipedia as a resource, I'd do it anyway, but I would click the links that Wikipedia cited, make sure the info was there in a way I could reasonably comprehend, and would cite that instead. I'm a master's student, and I do that too. Previous PhD student here, I used Wikipedia when writing my thesis. I had a psychology class in high school where we did the whole unit on dream interpretation, Jungian symbols and the metaphor of different events. Get to college and one psychology degree later, I've been told about 15 times that Jung was too high to find his toes and is barely more credible than Freud. Dream interpretation is basically useless. Who is the most delusional person you've known? I work in a small-town radio station. I've seen a lot of rookies fresh out of broadcast school let the tiny amount of fame they get from being on a small-town radio station go to their head. This one guy came into work one day, madder than hell that small-town radio famous wasn't enough to get him out of a speeding ticket. My brother was always bragging about how chicks he worked with wanted to bang him. Then after 2 or 3 months, when he inevitably quit or got fired, whenever the guys were talking about chicks they hooked up with, he would always talk about these beautiful women that wanted him, which he just never got around to hooking up with. One time, after starting a new job, he comes home all excited and yells, "Holy crap, the receptionist at this place is gorgeous, and guess what? She wants to F me." I said, "Dude, you've been there 1 day. How do you know she wants to F you?" So he says, "Well, I just walked through the front door, and as I was passing by, she looks me dead in the eye and says, 'Good morning.'" Oh my god, I lost it with that last bit. Good morning equals she wants to bang me? That's the most delusional thing I've ever heard. My current boss. He thinks the business is doing okay or is in a rough spot. He's slowly choking and killing it with his managing. I see the shop closing in mid to late August. Won't you feel stupid when it closes in early September? Seriously though, I hope he turns it around quick and that you don't lose your job. And if you do, I hope you find something quickly.
Worked a night job where I met someone who was studying rather than going to school. Eventually, I got out of him that he was studying to be a seducer. He studied Cleopatra, Rasputin, Casanova, etc. to learn the art of seduction. Basically, this guy's life plan was to just seduce his way through life. He had an intricate plan on how he was going to seduce our supervisor for a raise, seduce multiple spouses to support him, even how to get free coffee by seducing the barista. He must have done a lot of seducing to keep working that barely over minimum wage night job for years.
Sounds like he put his buy into charisma and his dump stat is intelligence. Ah, the charismatic idiot savant playthrough of life.
Sounds like this man was trying to go for a path of life that would have got him into the Gold Diggers video we did a few weeks ago. Better luck next time, failed social climber. My aunt, as in my mum's sister. She constantly stirs drama with other people and then calls you out for being mean to her. What the frick, lady? For example, one time I came outside and I see her pull up in her car. She starts chit-chatting to my mum. They're talking about her haircut. I tell my mum we needed to go and she drove away shortly after. Totally fine. I get a call from another relative a week later that she's angry with me because the day she came over I rolled my eyes and she reads lips. She knows I said something about her. This didn't happen. She then continues to post on social media how karma is going to get me, while simultaneously commenting on all of my stuff, saying how cute my daughter is. Delusion. This is my aunt exactly. She's also a drama queen. I visit my family once a year for a week, so I go to see my aunt and my mom at the same time. Every year my aunt will cause some drama. This year she launched into a casual conversation with me and just said, "You know your boyfriend kinda looks like a rat?" Told her that's not an okay thing to say. She said the truth hurts to hear. I got angry and left. Next morning she waltzes in like nothing happened. Asks me to come and give her a hug hello. I say no, explaining that what she said was really hurtful. She then flips her crap and starts screaming, "Why are you always starting stuff up like this? We never get into fights when you're not here. You're always causing trouble." I was so shocked, I just left. A very, very good friend of mine comes from a super rich family. His dad recently bought $1 million home to sell to him for under $300,000. He thinks his family isn't that wealthy and that this isn't that abnormal. There's always been a number of Ask Reddit threads like, "Who's the richest person you know?" and they're always fascinating reading. There are people like your friend who have no idea that it's not normal to be able to buy $1 million home or a yacht without blinking. One of my favorite comments was about a clueless girl from a very rich family who visited an equally rich friend. Friend's daddy had just bought her a huge, gorgeous penthouse apartment in Manhattan. Clueless friend looked around the place and said, "Wow, this is really nice. How much do you think the rent here would be? $1,000 a month?" Then she looked confused when the guy who wrote the story, who wasn't rich, started laughing. "I mean, it's a banana, Michael. What would it cost? $10? For those wondering, penthouse rent in Manhattan is probably somewhere around $15K per month. My little sister. Me and my eldest sister were raised by an alcoholic mother who left us with random people so she could get drunk. When I was about 6, my mum sobered up and had my little sister. The girl is delusional and has adopted the idea that she went through what me and my older sister went through. She recalls memories that never happened. She swears my mum beat her. Never happened. She makes up stories like she was a mortician, traveled around the world, she dated such and had tons of money. It's so weird. She spends every waking moment on Facebook and posts every single thing that goes on in her life. She has a felony, she beat her baby daddy until they broke up, and now both of those psychos have really crappy custody fights going on. I could go on and on. Sounds like a compulsive liar. I dated one of those. Frick all that. My schizophrenic uncle. He ran away from home in the US in his teens to Turkey, converted to Islam, came home a few years later. Believed he was the son of God and robbed a bank so that he could give the money to the homeless in the city we live in. He was institutionalized for many years and was released one day with no notice to our family, and died shortly thereafter of an accident caused by his mental illness. Well, I can't fault his intentions. This dude who used to live near me. There's a laundry list of stories, but 2 gems are when he took those fake $1 billion bills you can get at Halloween from church groups to Walmart, filled 8 shopping carts with random expensive stuff, mostly electronics, and tried to buy them with the, quote, money. Or when, after the cops were called on him for shooting our much younger brother with an airsoft gun, he grabbed a samurai sword and charged at the cops. Spoiler alert, he got tased. He later told us if they shot at him, he would cut the bullets in half, like Ryan Reynolds did in X-Men Origins Wolverine. That dude is lucky he didn't get shot. I realize the dude was probably white. That said, getting shot by the police can happen to anyone, and if you try to attack a police officer with a potentially lethal weapon, you can reasonably expect for it to happen to you. The cops understood that their bullets were of no use in the situation. He had been studying the blade since he was but a child. My ex-boyfriend plays the victim to his friends and family, yet I've spoken to 2 of his exes and we've all called the cops on him at some point. He obsesses and stalks and plays weird games.
He tried to break into my apartment once after we broke up to apologize to me and tried to convince my roommate I was unstable and making rash choices. We've been broken up 7 months now. I have a new boyfriend and he still sends me emails saying I'm being unreasonable.
This reminds me of my uncle. 3 out of 4 of his wives have literally fled from him in the dead of night. One of them took their daughter and sought asylum in Germany, where her mother was a citizen. He's a criminal and a sociopath, but neither he nor my grandparents see it. Some years ago, my grandfather had to get triple bypass surgery. There were some complications. He was in the hospital for months, and no one knew if he was ever going to make it out again. When he finally did, he discovered that the same uncle had stolen over $1 million from him over the months he was in hospice. Did my grandfather finally see him for what he was? Nope. He blamed my uncle's most recent ex-wife, calling her the criminal mastermind. She was the stupidest woman I've ever met, but at least she was smart enough to get away from him. Met a guy in the psych ward with psychosis who believed that he was a prophet. Really nice guy. I have a quote written by him. "Madness is not pure error, it is nature's dissatisfaction with genius." My grandmother was a psych nurse in a ward years ago, and she encountered a patient who was convinced he was the second coming of Jesus. He even walked like Jesus. She said, "If I hadn't known he was nuts, I might have believed him." Back in the day when mental health experiments were just doctors saying, "I wonder what happens when we combine these specific types of crazy